Good morning. In the interest of starting in time, I'd like to see us all finding our seats, and we'll get going. So welcome to the Dental Board of California quarterly meeting. Today is Thursday, November 29. Is the volume okay in the back? Can you hear? Volume's good. I would like to ask all of us to please turn our cell phones to silent and make sure they're off the table so we can avoid feedback noise. You may notice board members accessing their laptops during the meeting. They are using the laptops solely to access the board meeting materials that are in electronic format. This is an official business meeting of the Dental Board of California. The board welcomes public comment on any item on the agenda, and it is the board's intent to ask for public comment prior to the board taking action on any agenda item. If for some reason I forget to ask for public comment on an agenda item and you wish to speak on that item, please raise your hand and you will be recognized. Depending on the number of people who would like to testify on a particular agenda item, a time limit may be imposed. We ask all speakers to please stay on topic, and if a time limit is determined to be necessary, keep your comments to within that time limit. I would like to call the meeting to order and ask the board secretary to please call the roll.
Yes, Mr. President. Calling the meeting to order. Burton? Here. Chan?
Here.
Chappelle Ingram here. Lai?
Here.
Lai here. Laren?
Here.
Laren here. Lay? Here. Lay here. McKenzie? Absent. Medina?
Here.
Medina here. Morrow?
Here.
Morrow here. Olagi?
Here.
Alagi is here with a smile on her face. Pacheco?
Here.
Pacheco here. Stewart?
Here.
Stewart here. Witcher?
Here.
Witcher here. You?
Here.
You here. Mr. President, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. A little housekeeping. In terms of these mics, I've been told that they're always on, and if you choose and are ready to speak, just get them close to you so that you'll pick up. And when you're not speaking, you can just kind of move it away. Okay. So make sure that you get the mic down to where so the audience and everybody can hear. Lunch is tentatively scheduled for 11:30 till 1, and the restaurant has assured us that they're prepared to serve us, and so if you choose not to go out with the weather, the restaurant should be able to accommodate us at 11:30. And just a reminder, Dr. Witcher is acting as chair for the DAC until the elections can be held. Okay, so I've already said good morning. Once again, we've had a busy year with many opportunities to look at many important issues confronting our dental community. This morning, my comments will cover two recent activities that it has been my pleasure to attend. The board's executive officer, Karen Fisher, and I attended the Dental Hygiene Committee of California meeting on Friday and Saturday, November 16, 17, at the Radisson Hotel in Fresno. Board member Joanne Pacheco, RDH, was also in attendance. I reported on dental board activities since the previous DHCC meeting last spring. The report included information about the board's preparation and approval of its background report for sunset review, as well as issues that will be discussed at the board meeting today. The conclusion of my remarks included congratulations to committee members for the successful completion of the sunset review process and from moving from a committee to a board, effective January 1st, 2019. There were 4 subcommittees that met on the first day of the Dental Hygiene Committee meeting and discussed recommendations to bring to the full committee. The Legislative and Regulatory Committee recommended and the full committee approved the following proposed regulatory packages. CCR Section 1105.4, changes to the appeals process for educational programs. CCR 1115, a new regulation that establishes a retired license status. and CCR 1116, a new regulation relating to operation of mobile dental hygiene clinics. The subcommittee had intended to discuss changes to CCR 1109 relating to radiograph decision-making and interim therapeutic restorations. However, the DHCC legal counsel recommended this item be pulled for additional work and brought back to the committee and ongoing to the board for discussion at a future meeting early in 2019. So this item 14, was included in the dental board packet meeting materials, but has been withdrawn by the DHCC and will not be discussed at this meeting. On Saturday, there was a presentation by a representative from Rda regarding the dental hygiene examination. So, subcommittees reported to the full committee on items discussed the previous day, and the DHCC conducted its election of officers for 2019. They elected to keep the current officers into 2019. So Susan Good, public member, is the chair, president. Nicolette Moultrie, RDH, vice chair, vice president. Edselen, I hope I'm pronouncing, forgive me, Edselen Pujol, public member, secretary. And that concludes my report of the DHCC meeting. A second activity was the opportunity to attend and represent the Dental Board of California at CDA's House of Delegates Opioids panel discussion on November 9th at the Anaheim Hilton. Carrie Carney, the CDA editor, moderated the 1-hour presentation where Senator Richard Pan, myself, Ronnie Brown, Master of Public Health, and Dr. Blake, CDA's Chair of Legislation, each shared a perspective on what and how we are engaging in the work of recognizing and combating the opioid crisis in this country. The room was full, and we had a good discussion followed by a period of questions. I have been told that the response to that format was appreciated, and a follow-up article will be included in the January CDA update, highlighting that forum. I had the opportunity to share what the board will be discussing at this meeting as we move forward as a profession to help meet this ongoing crisis. I concluded my remarks in reminding the audience of the statutory requirement for all active California licensed dentists who possess a federal drug enforcement DEA registration to have registered in the Controlled Substance Utilization Review and Evaluation System, CURES, by July 1st, 2016. According to board records, there are approximately 34,015 active licensed dentists in the state. The DEA reports 24,633 California dentists licensed to prescribe. However, only 14,011 are registered in CURES. The board agrees with CDA that dentists play a pivotal role in providing quality care, ensuring patient safety, and supporting the improvements of public health. CURES can be a valuable tool to assist in that effort. That concludes my opening statement. We will now move to the approval of the August 23, 24, 2018 board minute meeting.
Mr. President,
Ms. Burton.
before you move on, I'd like to ask for a point of personal privilege, please.
Granted.
I'm living in Sacramento, as you know, we have had the Camp Fire, the biggest fire in the state of California. Dr. Jim Wood, who is the chair of the Assembly Health Committee, is also one of our members. He is a dentist, but he is also a forensic dentist, a odontologist. He is only one of 100 people certified in the country, and he has spent his interim time either in Butte County or in Sacramento County morgue, helping to identify remains of the large number of people who are deceased as a result of that fire. So I'd like the board to officially recognize his efforts and commend him on his efforts.
Thank you, Fran. Very well stated. Further comment? Do we need a motion or? No motion necessary, okay. So recognized. Thank you. Thank you, Spencer. And thank you, Fran. Okay, I think we're moving to the approval of the August, item number 3, approval of the August 23, 24 board meeting minutes. Dr. Chan.
Do we move for approval first and then comment? To put it on the table.
If there are amendments, you can go ahead and offer amendments. And then after that, there'll just be a motion to approve as amended.
Thank you. Well, good morning. I'd like to look at page 3 and page 12. The correct spelling for Dr. Sobel is S-O-B-E-L.
Thank you. I'd like to see names spelled correctly. I'm not seeing it yet on page 4, but if it's there. Dr. Chan, where is it on page 4?
It's on 3 and 12
3 and what?
of the notes, of the minutes.
We'll do a search and replace.
Thank you.
Page 3 and 12. Thank you. Further comments, further corrections, additions? Dr. Morrow?
On page 3, back to page 3 again.
I'm sorry, Dr. Morrow, you need to, your microphone.
Page 3, second paragraph, next to last line. Sole practice has decreased. I think that should be solo practice. In other words, meaning practicing alone.
Yes, thank you. Further corrections? Is there a motion to accept the minutes as amended?
Move.
Second?
As a reminder, when you move and second, if you would state your last name. Burton moved, Chan seconded.
Yes.
And now a public comment? Seeing none?
Okay. We'll take the roll. Thank you. Burton?
Yes.
Burton, yes. Chan?
Yes.
Chan, yes. Chappelle Ingram, yes. Lai?
Yes.
Lai, yes. Laren? Yes. Laren, yes. Lay?
Yes.
Lay, yes. McKenzie, absent. Medina?
Yes.
Medina, yes. Morrow?
Yes.
Morrow, yes. Alagi?
Yes.
Alagi, yes. Pacheco?
Yes.
Pacheco, yes. Stewart?
Yes.
Stewart, yes. Witcher?
Yes.
Witcher, yes. You?
Yes.
You, yes. Mr. President, passes.
Thank you. So we'll move on to item number 4, approval of the October 5, 2018 board meeting minutes.
Move to approve. Witcher?
Second, Blake.
We have a first and a second. Further comments from the board? Public comment? Seeing none?
Roll call. Burton?
Yes.
Burton, yes. Chan?
Abstain.
Chan abstains. Chappelle Ingram, yes. Lai?
Yes.
Lai, yes. Laren?
Yes.
Laren, yes. Lay?
Yes.
Lay, yes. McKenzie? Absent. Medina?
Abstain as well. Abstain as well, because I wasn't there.
Okay. Morrow?
Yes.
Morrow, yes. Alagi?
Yes.
Alagi, yes. Pacheco?
Yes.
Pacheco, yes. Stewart?
Yes.
Stewart, yes. Witcher?
Yes.
Witcher, yes. You?
Yes.
You, yes. Mr. President, we have, it passes.
Thank you. All right, we're moving on to item number 5, budget report.
Good morning, Sarah Wallace, Assistant Executive Officer. This morning before you contains the budget report for the State Dentistry Fund and the State Dental Assisting Fund. These funds are separate and are not commingled. This report reflects actual expenditures from July 1st of 2018 through September 30th of 2018. As of right now, we have spent approximately 16% of our total dentistry fund appropriation for 18-19 and approximately $250,000 or 10% of our dental assisting fund appropriation for 2018-2019. At this point in time, our fund does look solvent. I anticipate the governor's budget will be released in early January, and at that time we'll have an opportunity to reevaluate what our potential appropriations will be for 19-20.
Thank you, Sarah. Board comments, questions? Public comment? Okay, seeing none. Dental Assisting Fund, are you?
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought I had included that in
Did
the
you?
report. That we have spent approximately $250,000 or 10% of that appropriation. And again, with the governor's budget being released in early January, we'll be able to determine where our fund appropriations look in 19-20.
I have a question.
Question.
So why is there so much of a depth on fingerprint? I see on the bottom of the page, fingerprinting is like a huge expenditure.
That's actually not an expenditure, it's a scheduled reimbursement. So it's money that we can't count on.
Excuse me?
It's money that we can't count on. And I can
okay.
contact the budget office and I'll provide an additional explanation for the board.
Yeah,
in the
it
future.
just sticks out. It's like, why is that section, like that? As far as probation and fingerprinting and
All of those are actually reimbursements, they're not expenditures.
to
So it's
back to the
money,
board.
yes, it's money we receive back from fingerprint reimbursement, so money that we
Where does
receive
that come from?
as a result of hard card fingerprint results being submitted for licensure.
Oh, I see.
And probation monitoring fees or cost recovery. It's money that we can't necessarily count on,
Oh, okay.
so it's just considered a
Okay,
reimbursement.
thank you.
Additional questions? Thank you, Sarah. At this time, we will recess to convene the Dental Assisting Council meeting.
Okay, if we could have our DAC members come up, please.
Board members need to leave the table.
Yeah, when we go into our committee meetings, typically, the board members who are not part of that committee will be seated in the audience. I see we're still waiting for a couple of members to come, but I believe we have a quorum. So I've been asked to go ahead and start the proceedings. Jennifer, want to come up, please? We do need to start the meeting on time in the interest of getting through our busy agenda. As Dr. Stewart mentioned, I've been asked to serve as interim chair. Hopefully, we'll be having an election of DAC chair and vice chair at our next meeting in February. And then I will revert to being the board liaison to the chair. So I'm hoping that the DAC members will kind of take the lead on this and I'll just moderate. But since I am serving as chair, I will open with a few comments. We have quite a number of items to get through. I need to do this in a timely fashion while observing the opportunity for many of you to make comment. I know some of you have come here a long way. So I am going to ask our public commenters to limit their comments to 3 minutes. And if they are repeating items that have already been discussed or presented, to try to refocus their comments on new information that we have not heard. So with that comment, I would like to go ahead and call the meeting of the Dental Assisting Council to order. And could we have the roll?
Contreras. Not here. Davis Washington. Not here. Olagi. Here. Ovar.
Here.
Peacock.
Here.
Rodriguez.
Here.
And Witcher.
Here.
We do have a quorum.
Okay. Next, I would like to call our attention to approval of the August 23rd, 2018 Dental Assisting Council meeting minutes. If there's no additions or corrections, could I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve. Rose?
Ovard, second.
Okay, we'll need to call the roll. Oh, any public comment on the minutes?
Contreras. Absent. Davis Washington. Absent. Olagi.
Yes.
Ovar.
Here.
Yes. Peacock.
Yes.
Rodriguez.
Abstain. I wasn't here.
Abstains, okay. And Witcher.
Yes.
Okay, they do pass.
Okay, moving along to item number 3, update on dental assisting program and course applications and RDA program reevaluations. We have Laura Fisher here for this item. Thank you. Good to see you.
Tina Valerie, Dental Assisting
Oh, I'm
Unit
sorry.
Manager. That's okay. She's a hard worker. Whoops, I'm sorry. Okay, so currently the board has 2 analysts that review and process all program and course applications and program reevaluations. This memo provides an overview of the reevaluations that are currently underway, as well as the program and course applications and the status of each application. Page 1 begins the overview of the programs and course applications. Table 1 shows that we have received 48 applications to date and provides a breakdown of each application received in 2018. Table 2 shows that we have conducted 11 site visits this year. Table 3 is an overview of each application's status. And Table 4 shows the total number of approved programs and courses. Page 5 begins the overview of the reevaluations that are currently underway. Board staff is sending notifications to the programs that have been identified as needing a reevaluation on a monthly basis. These programs have been sent applications along with a request for submission of their curriculum. And as of October 30th, we have sent out 45 reevaluation notices, and we have received responses from 37 programs. 8 of those programs have notified the board of their closure. 8 programs have requested extensions. 5 programs have gone through the reevaluation and have obtained reapproval. 5 programs have submitted their curriculum and applications for review and are currently with our subject matter experts. 11 programs have had their curriculum and applications reviewed by our subject matter experts and have outstanding deficiencies. 3 programs have not responded to the reevaluation letter, and 5 new notices were sent in October. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about that.
I do have a question regarding the 3 that were no responses received. What is the process from here?
Pamela, can you make sure that the mic is closer to you?
Sorry.
This is also being recorded on the webcast, and sometimes we can't hear.
I'll repeat my question. One of the questions is 3 that have not responded to the letters. What is the process for them?
So I honestly am working still with the analysts to keep reaching out to these programs to find out what the reason is. I'm suspecting it's just that they're preparing maybe and just haven't had an opportunity to reach out to us. And some of them, because they were sent during the summer, I'm expecting that maybe they were out of session, and so there's just a delay in their response. So we're just trying to reach out to them and, you know, work with them if there's trouble getting everything together. So at this point, that's what we're doing about those three.
Okay.
Regarding the deficiencies.
Again, Jennifer, I'm sorry, you have to use the mic.
Regarding the deficiencies, was there information on why these schools were deficient? Is it paperwork, not meeting the objectives, or?
It's varying reasons. A lot of it is paperwork. They're not sending in everything that's being requested, and so it's just basically going back out and asking them for additional information and waiting for them to resubmit that information.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, we look forward to continuing progress in that area. I know it took us a long time to get around to doing program reapprovals. So it's good to see that's happening. Okay, is there any public comment on that agenda item? It's informational only, but anything to do with RDA program or dental assisting program approvals and reevaluations? Okay, seeing no public comment, I'll move on to agenda item 4, update on dental assisting examination statistics. And so, Tina, you're going to take that one again.
I am going to take that one. Currently, the board offers 4 written examinations: the RDA Combined General Written and Law and Ethics Exam, the RDA EF Written, the Orthodontic Assistant Permit Written Exam, and the Dental Sedation Assistant Permit Written Exam. This memo provides an overview of the candidates that have been tested over the last 12 months and the passing and failing scores for each exam. The tables also break down each examination by first-time and repeat candidates and their passing and failing scores. The board also offers the RDA EF clinical and practical examinations, which have been offered in February, May, and August of this year. We included the testing locations in this memo for these examinations, which was requested at the last board meeting, along with a breakdown of each examination. There are numerous pages of statistics for each program approved by the board and the passing score for each of them as well. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have about those.
If I might just make an observation, it seems like our RDA combined exam pass rate is still around 56%. And, you know, it's a question as to why it is what it is. And I know we've looked at that a lot of different ways. Maybe the program and course evaluations will help us understand why that's happening.
We're hopeful, and we are continuously working with the Office of Professional Examination Services to continually work on that exam. So, you know, any adjustments that we need to do, hopefully that will help as well.
I'd also like to make a comment in talking with Dr. Stewart about these issues. The schools that aren't performing well are going to be targeted for the reevaluations, probably taking a higher priority than those who, at least statistically, those students seem to be doing well. So rather than look at the overall numbers as you see on page 1, it would more likely be that you would get deeper information if you actually looked at the statistics that follow this summary, which shows you how well the schools or the programs do themselves. You find some that are doing very well, and you find others that are not doing very well. And so I'm not sure that that overall number is a clear reflection of whether or not how the exam is going, but that might assist you as you're looking through this material.
Yeah, the statistics are very detailed, and it's kind of hard to glean a lot of information when you have 2 applicants taking the exam and 1 fails. So you need to look at more of a composite over time, and we've had that information periodically in the past board meeting packets.
Well, I do have a concern because as an education educator, if I have half the class not pass the final,
I think there's something wrong with the final because half of the students aren't passing it. So I need to look at not just which students they are, but what does the final really entail or what's happening. So I would look at this, the whole exam, and say if half of the candidates, which 54% is, half of the candidates are failing, it's not just the schools. There's something that we're missing.
Well, I think the comment was that OPES is looking at the exam and looking at performance of individual questions, culling out questions constantly to find ones that don't test well. And so it's an active and ongoing process. We have made a lot of changes to the exam, and I would agree that it's probably a little of both, but still, you know, that's the approach that I think that we're taking.
I mean, we have the blueprint. You know, the candidates have the blueprint to be able to look at, to be able to see what material they need to be focusing, studying on. And a lot of it does say it's book material. It's not just what's happening in the office, because it does, real world is a little different when you're taking a written test. But you have to look at the questions and how they're worded and what's happening, because there is a huge failure, and we're failing those people that are trying to get jobs. And I think 54% or 56% is not a good pass rate. That we've got to look at something to help this, and you can't just look at the schools that are failing, because like you say, one might fail, one might, and I think you really need to look at the stats on, have OPS really look at the questions. We need to look, because we thought having the test combined would jump and help us, but it's not. We're keeping that same percentage, so something has to change.
I just had a clarification. I don't believe we thought that the pass rate would necessarily jump. It was just a combination of the two examinations.
But we were hopeful it would, because
well, the exams didn't change.
Right. Well, it didn't change, but you combine and you lose questions and you gain. I know.
No, we didn't gain questions. We just combined the exams.
Right.
So theoretically, by combining them, you could likely have the same percentage of pass rate. But OPES is looking at our exam on a regular basis, and the last time it was done, it was considered psychometrically sound. It's interesting when you're around, and at the time, there were people that strongly advocated that the test was too hard, and yet there were other schools whose students were doing very well said, no, we believe the test is an honest reflection of what should be tested. So I think there are many, many factors why people don't pass the exam. It could have many things to do with the education program they go through or the self-studies they go through. There are so many factors, but OPES will be determining the only thing that they have somewhat control over, and that's the questions. The preparation for the exam, there's a lot of elements that could be reviewed, and so that's why at least the board can go in and start looking at the programs to see how they're working and how things are going. But there are so many, many other elements. We had this discussion years ago, and our legal counsel at the time said, you know, trying to determine why some students don't do better than others is so complicated, because you almost need to get into the study habits of the individual student. You know, are they able to absorb information and all these things? So it's more complicated than you might think. But in terms of the psychometrically sound and defensible examination, that's our job, and that's why we hire the professionals to be able to look at that. So we'll continue the discussion, and we'll certainly invite OPES to come to our future meetings to be able to shed a little more light on this. But the exam is periodically reviewed, and especially now since we've had the occupational analysis done for EFs and RDAs, we will be able to, you know, keep things up to date and move forward. Thank you.
Okay. If there's no other questions from council members.
Well, I just had one other question.
Just let me interject here. Our council reminded me this is supposed to be an update, And then if we want to get into a lengthy discussion of what's wrong with the exam and what we might do about it, we should agendize that for another meeting.
I just had one quick comment that
Sure.
I think with reviewing the course curriculums at the different schools, I think that's where we need to start because it had been quite some time, 8+ years since it had been looked at. I think that's a good start, and that's what we're accomplishing now.
Thank you, Dr.
Keeping
Witcher.
the standards of the exam to
That is correct.
standards.
You're going off topic. This is only supposed to be an update, and I believe that if the council members would like to go into depth regarding this issue, it should be agendized for a future meeting.
We'll have the opportunity to do that further in the meeting to make that request. So we'll get to it. Thank you. Any public comment on this item? Okay. Very good.
Dr. Witcher,
Oh,
comment?
yes.
Can you hear me? Do I have to push the button? Kara Miyazaki, representing Foothill College, and I just wanted to share with you that the student population is very different these days, and I'm in the middle of Los Altos, which is Silicon Valley. And last year I had 18 students, and they spoke second and third languages, so I had 17 different languages in my class. And for the ESL students, it's really difficult for them to understand the terminology. They have to know it. I had a student who was up till 4 a.m. every day. She was Hispanic, and she was an excellent student. So they have to translate the English to Chinese, and then back to English, and then do the same thing for the answers. So they sometimes need more time for their tests, and if that's something that could be considered. But the language and terminology is very, very difficult for many of our students. And I have 2 Spanish-speaking tutors in my program that I've had for 3 years so far, and we're still tutoring many students.
Okay, seeing no further public comment, we'll move on to agenda item 5, update on dental assisting licensing statistics.
The board currently licenses, in the dental assisting unit, RDAs, RDAEFs, OAs, and DSAs. This memo provides an overview of the current and inactive, and delinquent licenses. This item also provides a breakdown of licenses per county and the ratio of RDAs to DDSs licensed within those counties. Beginning on page 4, there are tables indicating the number of applications received by the board in 2018, as well as those that have been approved, the number of licenses that have been issued, and applications that have been canceled, withdrawn, and denied. And I'd be happy to answer any questions on that.
Any council member comments on this item? Public comment? Okay, moving along to item 6. Discussion and possible action regarding the use of the alternative exam resource to administer the RDA and extended functions clinical and practical examinations.
The Dental Board of California administers the registered dental assistant and extended functions clinical and practical examinations as outlined in Business and Professions Code section 1753.4. This examination is offered approximately 8 times per year. Occasionally, additional exams are offered as needed, and usually we're testing about 25 candidates at each examination. Board staff is concerned that the administration of the RDA-EF examination is becoming difficult to sustain due to the limited pool of board examiners, the increasing number of board-approved RDA-EF programs, the increasing costs for site rentals, and the limited locations for the examination. Although we have conducted recruitment of the RDA-EF examiners, interest is low, examiner availability is limited due to their practice, health issues, and this is typically affecting the grading time and the overall length of the examination. Currently, we have 12 approved RDA-EF programs, and 4 programs have been issued approval in the last 2 years. As the programs continue to increase, The number of graduates to be tested will also increase. The RDA EF examination consists of a clinical and practical examination, which requires us to host these examinations at dental schools. There are only 6 dental schools in California, and staff attempts to secure these sites in Northern and Southern California. These schools are often used for other testing agencies, along with continuing education courses and the school's dental students. The competition for dental school rental is high, and the costs have increased over the years. Board staff is aware that there may be alternative examination resources available that could offer RDA EF examinations to meet the needs of candidates. Board staff is requesting the council's approval to research alternative examination resources, including regional testing vendors, to assist in the administration of the RDA EF clinical and practical examinations. Once this research is complete, the findings would be presented to the council and board for consideration and possible action.
Any council member comments on this agenda item? This is an action item, so if you're in agreement with this staff request, I'd like a motion to approve this, in which case this will go forward to the full board as a recommendation.
Dr. Witcher, I would like to motion to approve to look at alternative sites for our RDA EFs.
Can I ask just, when it says research potential alternative examination resources, is that just looking for new sites? It's not looking for a new exam?
No, it would include reaching out to regional testing vendors to see if they are able to also administer the examination. Either, I understand there may be one regional testing vendor that offers an RDA EF-esque exam. So that may include potentially researching that exam to see if it matches the same needs of our current RDA EF exam. There's also the option of other regional exams offering our examination format. This would be in addition to what we're already offering as far as our board administration, but we have concerns that with the growing number of programs that are becoming approved, I think 4 or 5 years ago, I think there was only 4, and we were able to sustain the number of candidates that they were producing. It's just becoming increasingly difficult to sustain the number of candidates that are applying right now. So I don't know definitively what it would look like, but we want the opportunity to present that back to the council for further consideration and what options are available.
So we have a motion on the floor, and I'm looking for a second.
I will second that.
Okay. Public comment.
Yeah, this is just a reminder, when you move or second the motion, remember to mention your name.
Second, Ovard.
Joan Greenfield, representing the EF Association. Although we are supportive of looking at this issue, we do want to bring a couple of things that we are concerned about. Historically, the REB exam, which was the first exam that hygiene decided to use as an option at the time, we find that we had about 7 students when I was still teaching at Sacramento City College in the hygiene assisting program. We had about 7 students that had took the very first REB exam when it was an option to take that or the regular hygiene exam that was given by DHCC. And all 7 students passed. We had them bring their patients back, and we checked them. And although the larger deposits were removed, there was a lot of small debris still remaining, which would not have passed the regular DHCC exam. We hear this over and over again about some of the regional exams, so that's one point. We want to make sure that the standard was kept to what we have. Also, Dr. Friedan, who is the chief examiner for the EF and has, I think, done a fabulous job in training the examiners. I would hope that if you switch to some sort of regional exam, that examination process or committee would allow Dr. Friedan, if he's interested, to participate in training them as to what we're looking for in California, because the current EF exams he put on, or I mentioned to the DAC last time in August, that there are 7 other states that have EF programs, but they are nothing like California to the degree that we're allowed to do that. So we want to make sure that there was standardization that met our higher standards here in California. Thank you.
Any further public comment? Okay, seeing none, I think we're ready to vote. So this would be approve staff's request to go ahead and look at alternatives for examinations and methods of administration of the RDA-EF, practical and clinical.
Dr. Witcher, it'd actually be the recommendation to the board.
To the board, correct.
Okay.
Jerry,
Contreras?
when you call the roll, once they respond, if you would repeat their last name.
Okay. Contreras, absent. Davis Washington, absent. Olagi?
Yes.
Olagi, yes. Ovard?
Yes.
Ovard, yes. Peacock?
Yes.
Peacock, yes. Rodriguez?
Yes.
Rodriguez, yes. Witcher?
Yes.
Witcher, yes. This passes.
Okay, thank you. Moving on then to agenda item 7, discussion and possible action regarding the development of a legislative proposal relating to the requirements for certification in coronal polish and Pitt and Fisher sealant in the RDA profession.
Good morning. Sarah Wallace, Assistant Executive Officer. This is a staff-related issue that's been discussed within the office based on concerns that we've heard through discussions with educators, subject matter experts, and phone calls that we've received from potential applicants for RDA licensure. The current requirements for RDA licensure require a candidate to complete the coronal polish certification as part of their RDA educational program, or if they're on the job train, they have to complete a standalone course in the application of coronal polish. What we've heard anecdotally is that the students receive their certificate of completion of coronal polish, and there may be misconceptions out there that since they have that certificate of completion, they're able to go out in the world as an unlicensed RDA and do the practice of coronal polishing. This is also carried over into the application of Pitt and Fisher sealants. Currently, coronal polishing is required for RDA licensure, and Pitt and Fisher sealants are not required for RDA licensure until the first renewal requiring continuing education, but all of the RDA board-approved programs offer the Pitt and Fisher sealant course. So all of those going through the educational pathway are completing the Pitt and Fisher sealants. So at this point, staff is bringing this forward to the council for consideration to direct staff as to whether or not we need to research this potential issue of unlicensed dental assistants completing coronal polish out in the world prior to becoming licensed as an RDA, and whether or not the council would recommend that the completion of the coronal polishing course and the Pitt and Fisher sealant course should both be completed post-licensure. So essentially, once an RDA became licensed, they would then be required to complete the coronal polishing course and the Pitt and Fisher sealant course upon their first renewal requiring continuing education. So this is just based on information we've received in the office. We don't have complaint history to determine whether or not this is an issue, but we have heard stories, and so staff is concerned of the potential practice for unlicensed practice of RDAs out in the world in the application of coronal polish and Pitt and Fisher sealants. So we wanted to bring it to the council for discussion and consideration.
So would this be for both on-job training pathway and the traditional program?
Yes, so if we move forward at the council's recommendation and the board's approval, we would develop a potential legislative proposal to change the statute to require the completion of coronal polish and pit and fissure after licensure. So that would remove it from the RDA programs. They would still have the opportunity to offer it as a standalone course after those candidates become licensed.
Now, it was my understanding that, maybe it doesn't really matter, okay, that if you went through the traditional program, that you actually wouldn't get your license until after you pass the examination, the real license. Excuse me. And so what you're saying, though, is they're still practicing.
Well, the program should be giving a certificate of completion of the coronal polish certificate if it's being completed as part of the educational requirements, and the standalone courses are also issuing a certificate of completion. And what we've heard are dental offices are considering that certificate of completion. It's not graduation from the actual program. They're considering that certificate of completion as a proof of evidence that they can practice coronal polishing.
Okay. My concern is when you give them an RDA license, you're not going to change that won't change anything that the dentist is requiring of or wanting the assistant to do. You're just going to be prolonging them being able to earn more money because they get more money being able to be an RDA and do those functions. So if you remove that from the RDA programs or for licensure, the dentists are going to see that they have their RDA and assume that they have it because that right now is what they have and what they're able to do. So doing that is not going to change the concerns that are coming to the board right now. I think it's going to make it worse.
Sarah, I want to thank you for bringing this to our attention. I think it's very important that we continue to protect our consumer. In saying that, to your point, these are only stories that we are hearing at the moment. I would like to see additional research done. I think it's our job as a DAC to further research this in detail and to get some statistics behind it. From what I'm understanding, we have 3 stakeholder groups: the educators, the applicants, and additional stakeholders are giving this information to the board. So that is my recommendation, that additional research is done in this area.
Would you like to make that a motion?
Yes, Dr. Witcher.
Hold on for a moment, please.
Sorry.
Did you want to?
Pamela Davis, Washington, and Ann Contreras have joined the meeting.
When we say, I don't want to second that yet because I don't know if research needs to be done because it doesn't seem to be a real patient safety issue because there's been no complaints. To me, it's a legal issue of what the dentists are allowing the RDA or the DAs to do. Personally, our education departments do not give out the certificate. We give a letter to the graduates that say you have gotten these certificates for a DA, you can work as a DA, and you will receive your license that says coronal polish, pit and fissure, but you cannot perform these until you pass your RDA exam. That's what the letter says to our students. So our students know. Many of the candidates for RDA know they can't do that, but the dentists are asking them to. So to me, it goes back on the dentist's responsibility asking the RDA or the assistant to do that when they are not really capable. So to me, it's the dentists that need to take responsibility for that. They need to know what the assistant's legal duties are. They need to know what our scope of practice is, and they do, but they're asking the assistants to do more.
Wouldn't researching the issue help further define where the problem might be?
I'd like to ask, how are we going to research that? Yeah. How, and dentists just aren't going to
word
say,
of mouth.
I feel like it's a lot of resource for the, for you guys, the staff, and how do we validate that research? I don't know if there's
That's a
ideas
good question.
or-
And again, these are things that staff have been hearing, and so we wanted to bring them forward to the council for consideration.
Removing those 2 things from an RDA program, you've made them a DA program. Every DA program. So then what recourse does the state have to license or to approve a DA program? I mean, you have the x-ray, you have the infection control courses, but you then no longer have RDA programs. All you have are standalone courses. So it kind of does a disservice to the students or to the candidates of these exams because they're not in approved courses any longer.
I also feel that if you remove it from the program, those physicians are going to still continue to do their practice the way they feel necessary. The candidates that are waiting for their licensure don't hold themselves to a higher standard, that they're going to continue to do so even awaiting the Pitt and Fisher sealant course and or the corneal polishing course. We cannot control what they do in private practice. That's held to the standards of the dentist and the candidate working in the field for the safety of our consumers. So I think leaving it in the program is the best practice for students. If you go through a program, you pass the program, you're awaiting those two additional courses. A lot of these programs, students have taken out student loans. The student loans come due 6 months post-graduation from the program, and then they may not get into those Pitt and Fisher sealant programs or the oral corneal polishing programs. Therefore, they're in a financial pinch even worse than before they started the program. I think it's a real disservice to the community of RDAs going through the programs. I think we need to leave it in.
If I might just interject, I think if staff is allowed to look at this, one of the things they would want to consider based on our testimony today is the effect it would have on the programs. And I agree with you that taking it out of the programs, there is going to be a downside. Now, there may be a way to address that.
I know I'm just coming in, but I know you're on Agenda 7. But in regards to the research, what will we be researching? I don't understand what there is to research.
That would need to come from the direction of the council of whether or not we needed to research it. So it's just a concept that we brought forward for the council to discuss, and if the council doesn't necessarily think we need to pursue it, then it can be all said and done.
Yeah,
I personally don't think that.
No.
I personally don't think that we need to research it because, like they've been saying, it's on the dentist. You know, and the students know that they're not supposed to be doing corona polishing and sealants. And if they're doing it, all they have to do is say to the dentist, and I know that some wouldn't do that, but they know that they're not supposed to be doing that.
It's just like packing the cord for an RDA. I've had 2 students just recently come and say, can we pack cord? And no, you can't. But the dentist is asking them, knowing they're just an RDA, they're not an EF. So it goes back to the DA or the CDA telling the dentist they need to know the scope of practice of and they need to have the license. If they're looking at just the certificate, where's the license? They need to go onto the website and research their employee to say, do they have a license to be able to do these things? So that's
if
my
I could
stance.
just jump in here procedurally, we do have a motion on the floor, and it needs a second, or it will die for lack of a second, in which case we could make another motion.
Yeah, and just
So-
in addition to what Dr. Woodger is saying, we've heard a lot of I individuals. I would like to look for the full umbrella from everyone's perspective, and I think allowing the research will tell us along the path, is this really something we need to continue, or is it not? By all means, I think the programs, yes, they do a tremendous job, but is this an area of opportunity to long-term elevate those programs and elevate the role of a dental assistant if they do not receive license of the certificates until after? In addition to that, it's not saying, I know from my understanding, so correct me if I'm wrong, they will have to show proof at first renewal, which is very similar to Pitt and Fisher right now. You can apply for the RDA and you show proof at the first one. That holds them to that accountability to make sure those certificates are complete.
So I'm looking for a second to Rosa's motion. Is there one? Would somebody else like to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to leave it the way it is.
So
Can we
to
do that?
not study the issue.
To not study the
Yeah.
issue and just leave it the way that the regulation states.
That
Now.
would not, unfortunately, that would not be sufficient.
Okay.
Because the board will want to weigh in on this issue. So the motion would be to recommend to the board that it rejects the staff's recommendation as to whether corona polish and Pitt and Fisher sealants should be required after licensure. And someone can just say so moved.
Repeat what you said and I will say yes.
The motion would be to recommend to the board that it reject staff's recommendation as to whether corona polish and pit and fissure sealant should be required after licensure.
Okay, so OVARD rejects what staff
You could just say so
is
moved.
saying there.
You can just say so moved.
So moved.
Thank you.
Rodriguez seconds the motion.
Could we have public comment on this item? And again, in the interest of time, I'm going to limit our speakers to 3 minutes.
The EF Association is completely and utterly opposed to this suggestion. To us, it's plain and simple that this is an enforcement issue only. By changing this in any way, it's not going to take care of the problem. The problem is enforcement. I understand from the last meeting in August, when LPES did their presentation on dentistry, they indicated that the dental offices that they surveyed for their scope of practice issues, that less than 50% of those individuals had the items that are legal for auxiliaries to do post in their office as they're supposed to do. So it's an issue partially with the dentist. It's also an issue somewhat with the auxiliaries if they're going ahead and performing this procedure. I think there's a lot of different ways to deal with informing them. You've got half of your population of dentists that you have emails for, that you could send out emails. We understand that some of this is happening that should not be happening. Make sure it doesn't. It's your legal responsibility to make sure your auxiliaries are licensed to perform procedures. You can send out letters. There's always all kinds of ways to notice. The cards that are given, the yellow cards for corona polish or the salmon color ones for sealants could have something added to the top of them saying you may not perform these procedures until you become an RDA. By the way, sealants is already can be post licensure, although the schools have to offer it. So that's something that's there. But to remove this has been something in the scope of practice forever, and I don't think changing that is going to take care of the issue you have. Thank you.
Karen Miyazaki, representing the Dental Assisting Educators Group, and we polled the Northern and Southern California educators, and no one was in favor of this proposal. And then representing Foothill College, I just wanted to mention that when they take these courses at the college, corona polishing costs and tuition $150, and sealants is like $90. And if graduates had to take them outside a course, because we can't chase them down and find out when they finish their exam, the private courses are actually much more expensive than taking it with the college with the inexpensive tuition.
Claudia Pohl, CDAA. I won't repeat everything because it's been stated well as well, but we would agree with Ms. Greenfield's comments and Kara's comments as well. We would not be in favor of this. If there was some compelling reason, and I apologize for being late and not hearing all the conversation, we are definitely open to having conversations with anyone about problems that might be existing and ways that can be circumvented. But this is not the answer in our mind at this point.
Dr. Guy Atchison, representing California Academy of General Dentistry, which is an educationally focused organization, and it seems that a lot of what you're talking about here is a common problem in that dentists aren't well informed, haven't been well informed about all the various auxiliary duties and classifications and the laws regarding how to manage these staffs, RDAs, RDAEFs, and even the certificate. So we would suggest that the dental board, the Dental Assistance Council, try and emphasize educating the dentists on their responsibilities for these laws and regulations for the auxiliaries, and perhaps CDA can help with that as part of the mandatory biannual review of California law. Perhaps this should be a line item specified topic. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further public comment, why don't we go ahead and take the vote on this? Does everybody know the motion and what we're voting on here? Do you want me to repeat it?
Please.
Okay. So to recommend to the board to reject staff's recommendation as to whether there should be changes to the coronal polish and pit and fissure requirements.
Contreras.
Yes.
Contreras, yes. Davis, Washington.
Yes.
Davis, Washington, yes. Olagi.
No.
Wait, I think we're voting, aren't we voting no?
Yes.
We're not making changes.
We
We're not
are,
making
was to reject the
changes.
staff's
Reject.
request to look into
Yes.
this further.
So we're rejecting it?
Yeah, it's a no.
This is
Sorry,
our
I have to
recommendation to
change
the
mine
board. The
then.
board will take this up.
Sorry.
No, it would be,
to reject it.
We were saying
that is
yes to
correct, that
Yes.
is correct, because the recommendation would
okay.
be to the board to reject it.
To
So
reject
that's
it.
yes,
Correct. So yes is
Okay,
correct.
I'm sorry. I misunderstood.
Olagi.
No.
Olagi, no. Over.
Yes.
Ovar, yes. Peacock.
Yes.
Peacock, yes. Rodriguez.
Yes.
Peacock, I'm sorry. Rodriguez, yes. Witcher.
Yes.
Witcher, yes. This passes.
Okay, that concludes number 7. Moving on, discussion and possible action regarding proposed statutory changes as requested by the Foundation for Allied Dental Education relating to A, addition of statutory provisions related to the use of materials and devices, and B, amendments to the Business and Profession Code to allow programs the ability to keep students enrolled until they successfully complete all licensure requirements. So we're looking at a request for 2 proposed changes, and again, this would come in the form of a recommendation to the board, should we desire to approve these.
So this recommendation, or this agenda item was requested by the Foundation for Allied Dental Education. So I wanted to introduce Ms. LaDonna Drury-Klein from the Foundation to present on this item and answer any questions the council members may have.
Good morning. Regarding the first item, I would again refer to the letters that were submitted. The history with regard to this is a bit complicated, but I'll try and make it as simple as possible. We've been involved in the sunset review process for the last 12 years, and during that last session, 2016, we were asked to work with 2 other stakeholder organizations to formulate reports with respect to inconsistencies between statute and regulation. And part of that 114-page report that was developed was part and parcel of the working document that you saw 4 years ago, but also a listing of areas where there were weaknesses or inconsistencies in language between statute and regulation. This was one of the areas that was identified during the last sunset review process, whereby in the development of the hygiene statute, this particular language, which again is referenced in our memo, was seen as something that could also be incorporated in the language for the RDAEF. We did not see the ability to incorporate it with respect to the RDA, but there are opportunities in the way that the statute is written for the duties for the RDAEF, being as broad as it is, to give the board the opportunity then to have the statutory authority to make more broad choices. For example, in the last year we have talked about the removal of the cord pack specific in deference to the tissue management topic. Then giving the board the opportunity, and certainly through this council, the opportunity to look at a testable function such as cord pack and change it to tissue management, whereby any contemporary procedures, contemporary materials, devices could be used. Without the statutory authority to make that kind of decision, we are strangleheld to simply cord. So what we have identified in this last sunset review process, and now coming up to The current one is ways in which we can give the board and the council the opportunity to broaden the testable procedures, broaden the use of the language that we have for restorative procedures particularly, and give the board the authority to make that kind of broad choice by adding this into our statute. So we would recommend through the sunset review process, as was requested by the board from stakeholders, to provide any input that the board can look at for its sunset review legislation. We would recommend that the council support the concept of adding the existing language that is in the hygiene statute into the Rda EF category. That therefore gives us the opportunity to use more contemporary materials without being prescriptive.
I hope the council members will have comments. I just have a couple of questions. First, sunset review may or may not be the appropriate venue to bring this forward. It might be better done as a new legislative proposal. I just don't, I don't know what the committee will have in mind. I think board staff would need to take that under consideration. We could, I guess, if the council wishes, we could forward this to the board for decision on that. The other question I have is, this talks about material or device approved for use. Approved by who?
Usually the FDA has restrictions. For example, I reference Orachix, for example. Orachix is only specific to specific hygiene-related or dentist-related functions. It would not be something that perhaps an RDA or Rda EF can use because it wasn't approved for that function. So we would want to make sure that, consistent with what is currently in hygiene statute, that any device that's used is not being used off-label.
I understand that, but that's not what this says. I mean, I guess we could clarify it through regulation.
We certainly could. We're simply trying to give the board the broadest net to cast at any given time, whereby a procedure, and again, I'll just reference specifically what we're trying to accomplish right now with respect to tissue management. It gives the board the broadest net to cast and gives us the opportunity to introduce contemporary materials that right now are so prescriptive in what we can use. It gives us the opportunity to open up more usable materials, particularly in the restorative area.
Yeah, and again, I think we need to look further at what would the appropriate education and training be, and would that need ed regs? I mean,
exactly.
That's
what I was looking at.
I support what you're doing, but I'm just saying it's actually a pretty big ask. First it's statutory, then it's going to be followed by some regs. And as you know, it needs to be, they need to be in parity. That was one of the biggest problem that we had in 2016, is that, we were trying to put regs in place without the statutory authority to do so. What we're trying to do this time, at the request of the board staff and asking stakeholders for sunset review language, is to clean up some of these issues that have been going on for some time. And when we see precedent already in place with statute, it makes the ask a little less asky, a little less aggressive, in that it's already in precedent, it's already in place. Let's consider placing it in the area where it's the most diverse with respect to the materials that we use. And then the board has the ability to, if you choose to change cord pack as a testable function, you actually have the statutory authority to do so. Any questions from the council?
Well, I was looking at the last line that was in the letter that you submitted, saying if he or she has the appropriate education and training, who's to decide what appropriate is?
That's what's in the statute.
Right.
Ultimately, it's up to the board to determine the educational regulations, and this gives you the ability to broaden whatever it is that you choose to do with respect to the types of devices and materials that we use within the current scope of practice. So for example, if I wanted to introduce a new adhesive type procedure with respect to ITR or glass ionomer, the way the current ed regs read is very prescriptive. This gives you the ability, when you go to write your ed regs, to introduce any and all materials pertinent to the duty.
agree with Dr. Ritter. I think we need to have the board look at it.
So you would like to see this forwarded for the board for consideration? Would you like to make that a motion?
Yes, I'll make that a motion to have the board review this.
So the council would recommend forwarding this to the board as a recommendation.
Olagi, second.
Okay, could we have public comment on this agenda item?
Gail Matthew, CDA. This is really just sort of a radar screen thing because there's a lot of work that has been going on with the regs for RDA, for dental assisting. And I recall in those workshops discussion about being able to teach new technologies. I'm not looking at those proposals right now, none of us are. So sort of putting it on the radar screen that language there may already be some work in the regs that would be coming forward that would be trying to address the same thing. It's just look there too. Because I do recall those discussions when we were in those workshops. There were discussions about allowing the programs to teach new technologies. So
You're talking about the comprehensive rulemaking package?
Yes, all that work that was done on, we're about to see something new that isn't what was, which is what Donna is suggesting. So just a radar screen, check that out. Thank you.
Sarah, I'm not aware of anything this broad in our current rulemaking package.
Yeah, I don't know that it's that
Yeah.
broad. I just think it's some discussion about allowances.
Yeah.
And again, I think without the statutory ability to get as broad as you would like to get in your educational regulations, you're going to end up having, again, inconsistencies between statute and reg, no matter what we bring forward going forward, without some kind of opportunity. The ed regs will continue to be in conflict with statute.
Understood.
Claudia Pohl, CDAA. We agree in concept and theory with this, and absolutely it makes sense. But my one question is also why it would not be put in with the rulemaking package, as Gail mentioned. That was my question.
They're two separate.
Two separate
You have to have the statutory authority before you can do it in reg. And that's what LaDonna has been trying to say. So it can't be done in reg before we have the authority in statute.
Well, we would be in favor of this.
And if I may, through the chair, I think that we're also trying to not have the repeat of recent history. And recent history is that we saw the suspension of issuance of an RDA license when the board took the position to eliminate the practical examination without having the necessary statute in place to give the board the authority to issue those licenses. We're trying to circumvent that by saying if we have the statute in place, whether it happens in tandem or whether it happens in preceding your regulations, we want to make sure that you have the authority to put whatever you want in your ed regs without compromise. And this will allow you to do that.
Maureen Titus. I'm also a dental assisting educator as well as a dental hygienist. The concern, I understand why it's so broad. When you talk about devices, we can talk about lasers, and those are tissue removing devices. So some people use those in place of retraction cord. So I really would like the committee to really consider when we talk about devices, not just materials, but devices, and what can transpire without proper education. And by putting it in there so broadly, that's a very big concern of mine.
EF Association, in response to that comment, there's other parts of the Dental Practice Act which don't allow for the cutting of hard or soft tissue, bar and auxiliary. So that position's already been met.
Okay, seeing no further public comment, we have a motion and second. The motion is to forward the request number A related to addition of statutory provisions relating to the use of materials and devices authorized for use in the performance of RDA EF scope of practice, and that will go to the board for consideration. So this is number A. We'll do number B next.
Contreras?
Yes.
Contreras, yes. Davis, Washington?
Yes.
Davis, Washington, yes. Olagi?
Yes.
Olagi, yes. Ovar?
Yes.
Ovard, yes. Peacock?
Yes.
Peacock, yes. Rodriguez?
Yes.
Rodriguez, yes. Witcher?
Yes.
Witcher, yes. This passes unanimously.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and take your proposal number B too?
Thank you. With respect to the second item, the current requirements for an RDA or an RDA-EF program, again, there's inconsistencies between what's in our ed regs currently and what is in statute. Again, trying to identify all of those things on the list that were identified as areas that we need to improve upon during this next process. One of the problems that, and it may not be a problem for some, but for other programs that choose to incorporate somewhat of a portfolio type model, the statute says that you must have graduated from an educational program or go through the work experience, and I've identified the current 1752.1 for you in the memo. What it is that we are proposing is to give programs, courses, institutions, a second opportunity. Currently right now, and I'll just use again the EF as an example. An EF program would have to demonstrate with a certificate of completion or a diploma from the program that the person has graduated. Now, we already know and have identified through the last sunset process, and Sarah and Karen both are aware, that the assumption that an enrolled student is allowed to continue to perform functions clinically as an enrolled student is only assumed and presumed that the population out there knows. The problem with that is that we see more and more offices now calling us and saying, well, if she has technically graduated, then how, until she passes her boards, how can she continue to perform these functions? So I know that through this next process, we will see some corrective or at least clarifying language, either in statute or in the ed regs, that will clarify in writing for those offices that need to hear where is it written that we can do this, that we will have to address that particular issue of the enrolled student continuing to perform those functions prior to licensure. This, however, goes a little bit in a different direction. What this allows programs to do, and I'll use mine as an example, I do not allow a student to graduate until they pass their boards. So in essence, it is the equivalent of a portfolio type model. So, but the problem is that when we go to apply, we have to demonstrate to the board a certificate of graduation. So it doesn't allow what the statute says and what the regs say are two different things. So what we are suggesting is, for those programs and courses that the existing application process works, nothing changes. For those programs that want the opportunity to keep a student enrolled until such time as they pass their boards, give us then an application that allows us to say they have met all the requirements as defined in regulation and that they are still an enrolled student, but they should now be eligible to take their examinations. For example, the written prior to going to San Francisco for the practical on the bench. It is not a replacement of the current system. I want to be very clear on that. It is simply an alternative pathway to getting to licensure without having to have graduated first in order to do so.
I guess I'm confused about the issue of because they can take the test a month after they're done with class, within a month.
Not, well.
Yes, I've had students do that.
That's correct. If in fact you want your particular program requests graduation before taking the boards. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's how traditional programs function. There are non-traditional programs like ours that without the board giving us the opportunity on the application to say, either has graduated, as evidenced by the certificate of completion.
Or will graduate.
Or will graduate. Now we have to go through 2 more layers of documentation at the time that they do graduate to get them to the boards. And with the EF having a filing period, that makes it much more complicated. It's easier now for the RDA because we don't have a filing period. So, and it may not be a fit for the RDA, may be better fit for the EF because we do have a filing period in certain times of year that we have to take exams. So we are actually having to tell the board that our students are graduated 2.5 months before they graduate so that they can get into the next San Francisco exam. So for programs that don't want to do that, and now what we're saying is we have to graduate them, they may have to wait 3 months for the next bench and clinical exam. What happens during that 3-month time period?
So this is more of an EF
I think
issue.
it probably is now that we don't have the practical.
Right.
I think you're right,
Right.
in that, you know, we don't have those problems anymore with, you know, as soon as they finish. But I will also tell you, for those programs that want their students to take the written while they're still enrolled in the RDA program, like we do, this will give us the opportunity to do that. The board right now cannot put that option on the application without the statutory authority to do so. So amending the application they have no legal authority to do that.
But what risk and financial cost is that to the school? Because the student is
That's
still
up to
enrolled.
That's up to the school to determine. That's up to the program directors to determine. There are a lot of programs that won't take this pathway. Your existing pathway still works. Nothing changes.
So you're just saying it's 3 pathways.
Correct. As opposed to 2. It just opens up opportunities for programs that want to do something different, but still stay within the confines of the regulations. Whether it be 800 hours or 410 hours, they still have to meet the criteria. I want the opportunity to put on paper that this person has met the criteria and wants to sit for their boards while still an enrolled student.
So just to clarify, the will graduate.
The will graduate is the same as saying anticipated graduation is X date, but they should still be able to sit for their examinations before that occurs because they've already met their requirements.
Okay, so there is a minimum amount of requirement.
Has to be.
Before they can.
Correct.
You
Nothing
can
in
sit.
that regard changes.
What happens if they don't finish the remainder of what they were supposed to finish? I don't
Well,
know.
you still have that same problem though with your current graduates. It's the same issue. They don't graduate from program unless they pass their boards. So we retain our students until they pass their boards. We have the ability to do that. If our institution is willing to incur the costs associated with that, that should be our option as the institution.
Okay. I don't think there is the regulation where they can take their state exam before they graduate.
That's correct. And without statute,
Okay,
you don't
that's
have the
what you're
regulatory
saying.
authority
Okay.
to do that. Correct.
So just one point of clarification with the current application process for the EFs, for the RDAs as well, but now that the practical is no longer in existence, it's not really the same. But an EF applicant, a program can submit a letter indicating that they will be graduating 30 days prior, but they do have to show proof of graduation prior to being able to sit for the examination. So we do have to have proof of graduation currently.
This is just about the applying process then.
During the application process.
Okay.
Before they are allowed to actually sit for the clinical and practical examination, we have to have proof that they did actually graduate from the program 30 days prior to that examination.
And this is asking to,
They would essentially be allowed to be we would get some sort of proof that they've met all of the requirements for graduation for the purpose of sitting for an examination, but they would have the opportunity, the program would have the opportunity to continue having them enrolled in the program until they actually become licensed. We would need to, from a staff perspective, we would need to work out at what point in time they would actually need to show proof of graduation from that program though.
And it's likely that it would be within the same timelines as it is now. What this allows us to do right now, if I have a student that doesn't pass any of the 3 examinations for EF, I have to re-enroll them. And this allows us, again, our institution is willing to take that risk. We are willing to keep them enrolled so that we don't have to go around and re-enroll, solely for the purpose of them being able to continue to practice, remediate, and then take their next examination, which could be 3 or 4 months later.
So is this asking to change the RDA as well?
No.
Right? Okay,
It-
so
it
it's
is
just,
a- is
it's
a
basically
recommendation.
just for the EF.
It is certainly a recommendation to consider for the RDA as well, if that is in fact an opportunity. I will say that both our RDA and our RDA-EF program have been beta testing this for the last 2 years. And again, we do not let our RDA students graduate until they pass the written. But we have to demonstrate to the board that they have passed, that they have graduated, and we do that, but we turn around and re-enroll them the next day, and we shouldn't have to do that, not with this proposal.
How does that work? You can't take the test in this for RDA unless you're graduate, but you say they stay enrolled.
The way that it is right now, yes. And so we have to graduate them on paper.
Okay,
get
I'm just
their
misunderstanding. I
application
thought
in.
you said you do that currently.
What I do currently is I graduate them on paper. I have to submit a graduation certificate so
For
that
the-
they're eligible to
strictly
sit.
RDA right now I'm
For the
talking about.
RDA,
Okay.
correct. But we still keep them enrolled, and our students understand that that certificate of completion is only for the justification of the boards for them to sit. Until they pass their boards, they do not actually get their graduation ceremony.
Oh, okay, that's different.
It's
That's
graduation.
Well,
It's
no, you're
graduation.
talking walking compared to what the paper says. That's different. It's completely
So you're
different.
saying they haven't graduated?
For
but
us, they have not
intents and
graduated until
purposes
they
for the
walk.
application of.
Okay,
That's
of
correct.
The test,
That's
you're
correct.
saying they've graduated, but they haven't met all the.
They have
scope.
met all the criteria.
They have met, they're just not walking.
They're not walking, and they will not graduate from our program until they pass the written.
Would somebody venture to make a motion to support this?
I need to think about
We
it.
would be forwarding this to the board for consideration. This would be
Correct.
recommendation B that was made by FADE for statutory change to allow the option to
Correct.
retain the student within the program until they complete their examination.
Correct, and have the option on the application to demonstrate that they have met all the requirements of graduation, but they are remaining enrolled in the program until, in fact, they pass their boards.
Dr. Witcher, would we be able to further look at this in February and partner with Sarah and staff to see how many additional programs that this would benefit, how many additional healthcare professionals, meaning our RDAs or EFs, this would benefit before presenting it to the board? Is that an option?
Yeah, we can work with the council and additional program directors to see what their interest is in this. At this point, I believe, and LaDonna, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a lot of the concern with this was the students of the EF students that are actually failing the examination and making sure that they're continuing to be enrolled so that they
Correct.
can remediate and prepare
Correct.
for the next exam.
It's a huge, huge concern.
So
Yes.
staff could, per the council's direction, we could work with the FADE Institute and then continue to evaluate this to bring back at a future meeting.
So would that be a better way to approach this from a staff perspective? In other words, the council would make a recommendation for staff to further study the issue and bring it back as an additional proposal?
Yes, I can't guarantee that it'd be the February meeting, but a future board meeting, yes.
Thank you. Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, we had a couple of suggestions. One is just to make a motion to forward this to the board for consideration as recommended by FADE, or to take it, to recommend that it go to staff for further evaluation.
I'd like to take it to staff, because I'd like to talk about it a little bit more too. And not just EF, but RDA as well.
Would somebody like to make a motion to that
A
effect?
motion to take this to staff and to agendize for a future board meeting or future DAC meeting.
Peacock seconds it.
Any further public comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, we have a recommendation to refer this to staff for further study, to bring it back to the council at a future meeting.
Contreras,
Yes. Contreras, yes. Davis, Washington?
Yes.
Davis, Washington, yes. Olagi?
Yes.
Olagi, yes. Ovard?
Yes.
Ovard, yes. Peacock?
Yes.
Peacock, yes. Rodriguez?
Yes.
Rodriguez, yes. Witcher?
Yes.
Witcher, yes.
Okay, thank you. Moving along to number 9, discussion and possible action regarding the scope of practice for the RDEF2 as submitted by Joan Greenfield, representative of the RDAEF Association and J Productions. And this is addition of administration of local anesthesia and addition of administration of nitrous oxide and oxygen.
I wanted to make a correction also. I haven't submitted anything recently indicating that I was representing J Productions. I was representing the EF Association only. Thank you.
Now, if I could just, as chair, interject here. You gave us a very detailed presentation
Yes, I have.
at your last meeting.
Condensing.
There is material in the board packet that everybody's had
Right.
the opportunity.
Enough
So,
to hold you down in the wind, right? 40
yeah,
pages.
if you could just try to summarize.
That's my intent.
Thank you.
Okay. I did want to make a couple of other comments before I start on the presentation that we did and the information that we provided for you. And one of the reasons for that is not only in some information that was in your packet from other sources, but some letters that are being distributed around the country and so forth. I just wanted to deal with this issue up front, and that is that I believe that the CDHA and the Executive Officer of the Dental Hygiene Committee of California continue to be somewhat divisive in the information they're providing you on what it takes to become licensed in anesthesia for the hygienist, because they continue to say, 5 million hours and so on and so forth. There's even information in your entire packet on that issue. So what we did, a couple of things. We went through, and it's something you're being handed out now. We went through a community college program, a university dental school program, and a private sector dental hygiene program, and printed those. And these are all the subjects that are required in the dental hygiene program. And we then highlighted those issues that have to do with directly or indirectly the education of local anesthesia. So you'll notice that for Sacramento City College is the first one. Out of 45.5 units in dental hygiene, only 6 of those relate to local anesthesia. For UOP Dental Hygiene Program, there's 63 units, and only 6 of those relate directly or indirectly to local anesthesia. And we picked San Joaquin Valley College Hygiene Program, and out of 65 units, only 9 of those relate directly or indirectly to local anesthesia. So you've been kind of led down a little merry path by some of these folks, that there's significantly more education involved directly in local anesthesia. In addition to that, there is a letter that's been circulating for the last couple of months. I've gotten multiple copies of this letter from former hygiene students of mine, not only that live in California, but that live all over the country. There are hygiene blogs out there that are repeating this information. And so I have a copy of this letter if you'd like to see it, but basically it is from someone who is putting out information saying that it takes 2 years of education, rigorous training and education to learn how to perform local anesthesia. Another sentence says that I have recommended that EFs be taught this in just a couple of weekends, which is not true. And the last part of the letter says, if you're concerned about your hygiene profession, make sure you show up at the dental board meeting. And this letter is signed by Anthony Lum, Executive Director of the Dental Hygiene Committee. So in addition to making 2 comments that are completely untrue and unjustified, he has also made it perfectly clear that this is an issue about scope of practice that they don't want someone else to have. Okay, so we'll move forward. At the meeting in August, Ms. Ovard, you asked, and Ms. Contreras to some degree, you seemed concerned about proposal content and the curriculum, and so we did bring that forward to you. And I don't know if you have any questions about the 40 pages of information we provided for you. I will let you know that the way that we answered this information is that when you asked us to provide you with additional information about Ms. Olagi, particularly your request on information about what are people actually doing out there and how often do they actually need anesthesia and what kinds of practices and so forth. What we did is put out on social media that we were going to be publishing another survey on SurveyMonkey. The only thing that we said was that you had asked, that the DAC had asked for this information, and that please get it out to as many EF2s as possible so that the information could be accurate. You'll see that we did have a 38% response, because according to the dental board, there are about, at the time I asked, there were 705 licensed EF2s. I believe there's a few more since that time, so we had a huge response. There was no coercion. There was no saying, hey, make sure you say this or that. That was simply put out there to say, this is important information and we need some feedback as much as possible. If you've read through your packet, you've seen the results of that. So I don't know if you want me to go through quickly any of the results from that survey or not, or whether...
No, I thank you for doing that, and thank you for your time and diligence doing that.
Right, okay. Ms. Ovard and Ms. Contreras, I explained to you the regulatory process because you were asking, well, we want to see content. We did provide you with a sample of content so that you would understand what we're looking at, so hopefully that's something that we answered for you. And then I believe it was several of you that asked questions about the qualifications of faculty. And hopefully you read through that we have more stringent requirements for faculty than any other auxiliary in California. So hopefully you were able to look through a regulatory language that we've suggested in regard to faculty requirements, which far exceed anything that hygiene has, and perhaps even exceed in some degree a few things that dental schools have. Did you have any questions about the information that we provided for you?
I didn't say anything about pharmacology.
Pardon me?
Pharmacology. Do you have anything in there with pharmacology?
Yeah, there I
listed
believe the regs do list pharmacology.
as one of the classes that's
Yeah, oh,
already
yeah,
needed.
absolutely.
This is just what you added to it to make it.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, this is just what we added there, but the original we showed you absolutely medical emergency.
But adding this, you would need additional, I mean, I know pharmacology, but you'd have to have additional classes going through pharmacology if you're going to be adding anesthesia to it. Wouldn't you? I understand the general broadness of pharmacology when you're doing the EF2 and you're doing, but when you're adding anesthesia to any course, you'd want to go deeper into the pharmacology part of it, wouldn't you?
Yeah, there's pharmacology, head and neck, anatomy, physiology,
So just
medical emergencies.
additional information on pharmacology is what I felt was missing.
It should be in the regulatory language.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I could just focus the discussion, we did ask OPES what they thought of this, because they would be involved in going anywhere with this. And they made a series of recommendations, and it's sort of a stock list when you look at any scope change proposal, which this is. And I won't enumerate it here because it's in your meeting information, but you know, I'm just going to, I want the council members to really take this up, but I'll just say that, you know, I guess OPES and also I have some concerns about what the actual need for these duties is. For instance, looking at the 2016 occupational analysis, direct restorations was pretty far down the list in terms of the frequency of procedures that are performed. It was like 46th out of 65. It's true, some EFs are doing it. There may be information that OPES could come up. In other words, their occupational analysis did not include a lot of detail about the frequency other than that was in their frequency versus importance statistics. So again, I just think I understand putting out a SurveyMonkey is helpful. As a matter of fact, in 2012, the board put one out then too, and the findings were that the duties were not being done very much. Now that was 2012. This is 2018, and I understand we have more programs.
Well, yeah,
and
at that
things
point you
have
had very
changed.
few, yes.
But I'm still just, I'm not convinced that the need is there. You know, and again, this gets back to defining the nature of the problem to be solved and what extent the public's health and safety has been adversely affected by the current situation. It's been a while since I did restorative dentistry. I used to do some quadrant dentistry as a general practice resident, and I don't really remember having had to give supplemental anesthesia very often, and even as a GPR, I was certain anything but fast. So I guess what I'd like to see is I think we need to enlist the help of OPES to look at this further if we're going to go anywhere with it. I mean, that would be and to me, it's not so much a question of the education. That's a detail. I think duties can be taught, skills can be learned. So the educational content and all that is something I think of a side issue. I think it's really a question is, what is the need? Is there a positive benefit that is justified, that justifies the cost and also the administrative burden and all the things that have to go along with a proposal like this? But that's just me. I really want to hear what the other council members have to say. I know that they have a lot of concerns about adding duties like this. So let's hear from them.
I do have some concern about the need for this. I'd also, and I don't know if this would be OPS, to find out how many of these EFs or these practices that say that they do need additional need for anesthetic, are these most of these places doing quadrant dentistry? And I have had experience as an EF, not EF2, but EF, working in general practice and also in a health center. And we don't do quadrant dentistry, and certainly for the single tooth, the doctor is unable to give enough anesthetic to get the patient through the procedure. And also the doctor usually makes, before they leave the patient, make sure the patient has profound numbness and will make it through the the cord packing part of it. Also thinking, again, I'm not an EF2, I don't place restorations.
Correct.
But also thinking about working chairside with my doctor who places restorations. Maybe we might do a couple. I don't remember a time when we've had to stop and re-anesthetize the patient during that procedure. So again, I kind of would like to look at, I don't know if there's a way we can, more the need for this, and is the need mostly in practices that practice with quadrant type dentistry, or maybe like a sleep sedation where they have to do quadrant type dentistry.
It's unfortunate that you're not an EF2. I think you would have a little better understanding of what's going on here. You were not at the last meeting that we testified also, and I had a number of EFs that came forward and talked about how often they're needing additional anesthesia. And also the survey is we're looking at almost half the people who are licensed as EF2s. The statistics are there. You want to do your own survey, you're going to get the same. One of the things that I didn't mention is as we did this survey, at first they were just a few, and then a few more, and a few more. But every day I go in and look, and you can then, in SurveyMonkey, go in and look at individual responses, and then look at where they're from, what they're, put these figures together. The only thing that changed percentage-wise through the entire survey was about 1% to 2% back and forth. No matter how many people we got, the responses were the same by 1% to 2% changes in how often, what they were doing, the kinds of restorations. In response to you, Dr. Witcher, I sent a letter to Ms. Fisher. We have major concerns about OPES's survey that they did in response to some of the restorative procedures. I've also expressed that concern to CDA. You're talking about roughly 35,000 dentists in California, and OPES surveyed 1,000 of them, 1,046 of them. I went back and listened to her entire presentation. There were some concerns that the only restoration they talked about was amalgam, which very few people are doing anymore. So if you're using that as a reference as to whether restorations are even done or not, I think that's a poor reference point and the way that the survey was done from OPS. So I hope that you will take that into consideration also, that some of the information they came up with is not what contemporary dentistry looks like.
Question.
Sure.
Now, Do you have a list or dentists who are supportive of this, or a survey so that we could get their take on this? Because I know once anesthesia is being placed, liability is a concern. Are dentists going to be on board as far as RDAEFs being liable?
It's not any more liability than hygiene giving local anesthesia, so I
Right.
don't see where that would be an issue.
But we're talking about EF.
We're not forcing anyone to have local anesthesia. That's why we're considering it as an optional permit for those who choose it. All I can do is tell you what I've heard, why I'm even here. I didn't make this up myself. I get contacts on an ongoing basis from EFs and their dentists. When are we going to get local anesthesia? This would make things so easy. There were supposed to be a number of dentists here today. I understand we have a couple here to speak to the issue. I think there were some emergencies and weather issues. But there would be a way to do that by simply locating the 705 EF2s that are out there and finding out where they work and getting feedback if that's what you want. Again, this is an option. And you keep saying, well, this is an EF, not a hygienist. The education for giving local anesthesia is going to be as good or better in regard to anesthesia itself than hygiene gets. So if the dentist chooses to do this, that's their option to do so.
I just have some grave concerns with this process. I've been in the field 35 years. Yes, I'm a registered and certified dental assistant, and I'm also a sterile processing anesthesia tech. This is concerning to the public. A lot of the students that are EFs, EF2s, have come through private practices. They don't have the background of education. They don't have the background of a lot of different aspects of the job. There's a reason why you have hygienists and dentists giving the anesthesia. If you've ever been witness to a patient that's had a contraindication and you don't have the education behind you to deal with it and understand the process, this is concerning.
That's part of the
If you have
education.
a practice that's turning over basically a mill, that you have so many patients that the doctor is unavailable to come back and give more anesthetic, or you're doing such dentistry, I don't know any patient under the age of 12 that's going to sit for 2 or 3 hours, as you commented at the last meeting.
I commented about crab mill restorations.
Without patient management is an issue to
Right.
begin with, let alone the anesthetic not lasting. Of course it's not going to last. So if you have a practice, I think it needs to really be looked at your patient flow and your practice as far as re-administering local anesthetic, whether it's by a hygienist or the dentist in the office. I don't see any of the evidence you've provided that tells me that the program you're proposing is going to be sufficient to meet the needs of the community and the safety of the community.
Is there a way to get more information on the level of education? I feel a little confused right now because, Joan, you stated that we got conflicting information from hygiene programs, and then now you just gave us some new information highlighting what their education really is like. Is there a way?
Well, it's not, you weren't in the past meetings, it's not, I've gotten up multiple times and said that's not the hours. There have been people to get up to, basically the way they've talked over the last 3 or 4 meetings that we've had on this subject, you would think the entire 2 years of dental hygiene was spent on learning to do local anesthesia. Another thing that we did is look at when local anesthesia is actually taught in the programs, and for some it's taught the 2nd semester, very few, mostly the 3rd or 4th semester. So, we've had claims from a couple of folks that they had 1,600 hours of clinical to look at this.
The information I read, I certainly didn't take it like they're 2 years spent.
Well, you haven't
on
heard them
local
say it.
anesthetic.
Yeah.
The way I interpret it is that they are spending a lot of time on it. However, the prerequisites of the oral and the head and neck anatomy, there's a lot of prereqs that are taught.
Which we have included in our program.
I know, and then taking up the hours. So I just wondered if there's a way that we can see how parallel the education is for a hygiene student.
If you carefully look at what I handed you, you'll notice that most of it's hygiene clinic and all kinds of other subjects that has nothing to do with local anesthesia. We're hoping that you would recommend that we form a committee, and I would hope that it would be at least Mr. Wagi,
Can I?
yeah, to look into this further, and with some folks that are not only EF2s and working out there, but the dentists who utilize them and recognize the quality of the education they have.
So I agree with Dr. Witcher. The education is a piece that will come, and it needs to be met. But that's a piece. I think what's crucial is to form, and that was recommended by OPS in here, is a focus group, collaborated of dentists, of EF2s that are practicing, along with hygienists. So we can talk about this as healthcare professionals together to discuss the next steps that need to be taken. And is there a need in the community? I think the Survey Monkey is a small part of what we need to see long term. To Dr. Witcher's point, there was a survey done in 2012, and now it's 2018. A few years have passed, and the need has increased. What will the need look like in 5 years from now, 10 years? And that's what I would recommend, that we form a focus group or a committee, whatever is the best recommendation, to look at this with all of our stakeholders and how their voice is heard, and then we can have that feedback.
I would hope that you would agree to do that.
I think also critical to this discussion is the last paragraph on page 2 of the memo before you get to the support and opposition. If you're going to be considering this, I would be recommending to the board to consider a total rehaul of the entire RDA EF program. We want, I believe, to guide the board to get away from different levels of certifications. That's just more information for dentists to have to, decide who in an office can do what scope of work, and that may be something that you all think is a simple task. I have heard today apparently it's not so simple because some dentists don't realize that people are working out of scope, but I would be recommending to the board, and as I am recommending to the DAC, that we get away from additional certificates on top of permits, on top of this. We already have RDAs licensed before 2010. We have RDA 2s licensed after 2010. We should look at streamlining the RDA EF. I think that that's an important, very important consideration that needs to be discussed. As Dr. Witcher said, if you decide to move ahead, the education would be declared essentially and clearly outlined in a regulatory package. However, I think the important part to get to this is twofold. Getting additional information has been outlined in the second recommendation in your packet from OPES, and also then considering, okay, if this is going to be good for a small group of people, why wouldn't it be a requirement for all RDA EFs? Just take that into consideration as you continue to deliberate on this issue.
May I comment on that? I was quite surprised when I saw that recommendation for OPS because there truly isn't multiple layers of EF. There's the RDA EF. And we have used the common recognition of EF 1 and 2 to delineate those who didn't go on to get the additional functions. In time, EF1 will no longer exist. You cannot become an EF1. You cannot just learn to do those 3 remaining functions. So that will on itself go away. So there really isn't, I was looking at what multiple layers of EF? There aren't.
Well, currently there are those who have been licensed before 2010 and those who have additional duties who've been licensed after 2010.
True.
And what your request is at this point is to now add a certification for not all EFs, but for those who wish to have an additional certification. And I would just recommend that the DAC and the board look closely at that and try to streamline what is it that the DAC and the board wants EF scope of duties to be, now and in the future.
I do agree. There are layers there, and that's, I think, what presents confusion in the field of what this EF can do and EF2 are licensed after a specific date. So I do want to take that into consideration, and if there was a focus group form, that they do look at that and we streamline it. It's very important to the future of all the EFs.
Sure, and I hope that would be an enforcement issue as well. If you, I have heard there are a few EF1s doing EF2 functions, but that's, again, just like previous discussions on RDA, it's an enforcement issue.
So if I could bring this around a little bit, it seems there are some who would like to study this further, some who would like to reject this. So I would suggest someone make a motion to do one or the other.
Can we have
After we make a motion, then we open it for discussion. We're not taking the vote yet, thank you.
Sorry. I would motion for further research or a focus group to be formed and developed with the recommendation from OPS that has dentists, hygienists, and EFs and interested stakeholders all present in that group.
Would you be willing to accept an addition to make the suggestion that the board explore the possibility of eliminating the multiple layers of RDAF certifications?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Witcher, for adding that. Yes, absolutely.
So just for clarification, the DAC would not need to take Ms. Olagi's first motion, if you will, regarding the additional study to the board necessarily. Is that correct? That's something that you would do among yourselves. But they would take to the board the second section, if I heard Dr. Witcher properly state, that he would like the board to start to consider whether or not they would even consider a separate certificate or whether something would be incorporated. Is that what you said, Dr. Witcher? And do you want to do that in a second?
But I think the intent was for the council to direct staff to come up with additional recommendations. I guess they can do that at the council level. It doesn't need to go to the board.
Right.
So, okay. Everybody clear on that? So the motion would be for the council to direct staff to conduct more in-depth surveys of dentists and a larger sample of RDEFs to assess opinions on adding these duties. And that would be A. And then B would be to suggest that the board explore the possibility of eliminating future for the multiple layers of RDA-EF certifications.
Ms. Oleg, do you accept that clarification?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
And so what we're looking for is a second, and then we can open it for discussion.
I second Rodriguez seconds the motion.
Okay, with that, we're ready for public comment, and I would request that people try to limit their comments to 3 minutes and try to avoid repeating what the previous speaker has said in the way of points.
I'd just like to make one more comment. I'm not
Please.
sure how you're going to compress EF1 and 2 at this point unless you force EF1s to become 2s. This is an issue that's going to take care of itself. I understand that perhaps you might want to not have these nitrous oxide and local anesthesia as optional permits and include those in an EF program, but as far as 1 and 2, I'm not quite sure.
Well, let me respond to that. We heard testimony that we're having a great deal of difficulty recruiting RDA-EF examiners. Now we're going to add certainly another clinical examination that's going to be kind of complicated. I don't know that we have the resources to give that separately. The only way we could give it would be as part of an RDA-EF practical. So just thinking about how this would actually play
Sure, although
out.
regional
Yeah.
exams do anesthesia.
Right.
Exams too.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Susie with Dental Specialties Institute. I'm an RDA, EF, and been practicing for 35 years. I'm also, I teach the DSA as well as we have the oral conscious sedation for adult and child in our program. So we have our oral surgeons and periodontists involved in this. I have a suggestion for the EF too, is maybe have a permit, like a permit for the RDA EF2, taking a course like the DSA, because I don't understand the confusion with if somebody is a DA in an oral surgeon's office, taking a 110-hour program and being able to administer anesthesia to the patient under direct supervision of the oral surgeon or periodontist. How that's very invasive there, and also patient safety concern. So if we're just doing local anesthesia for the RDAFT, make it a permit, because if you make it a requirement for the whole program to exit, doesn't mean that everybody can qualify and is able to do it. So if there's a permit program, then they get this, they go through the training, pharmacology, whatever it is, and have a certain amount of patient requirements under direct supervision of the oral surgeon or, the dentist and the facility. I've worked for large practices. I still work for a company who is a large group cosmetic office. And we do quadrant dentistry a lot. I've done long span provisionals from cuspid to cuspid, a lot of cosmetic work, the right arm. So I can see where sometimes the doctor has to go do an exam or see, and that's the benefit of having an EF or an EF2, is to be able to be a lot more productive with exams or whatever. But if you have an EF in your office, that is your right arm. And I hate the term that ignorance is not an excuse. Either you know or you don't know or you don't care whether or not you're licensed to do a duty. So it doesn't make any sense to me. I know exactly what I'm supposed to do in my license. I know exactly, and you have to investigate. The same thing as if the OAP, you've got people who have been in the field for 30 years and they're sizing and fitting orthodontic bands, but they're saying, I'm grandfathered. Well, there's no such thing as grandfathered on the table of duties.
Thank you. If you could draw your conclusions now, you've reached your 3-minute mark.
I would also, I recommend that there be a permit, because if you're allowing a dental sedation license with no pharmacology or anything like that, but they're also I'm making them go through an OPSA course, maybe you can offer, just consider that, because I think just maybe infiltration or something, just numbing for packing the cord. It's just my
Thank you
thought.
for your comment.
Thank you.
LaDondre Klein-Fade. With respect to the motion on the floor, could you please repeat the motion that is currently on the floor?
Yeah, the motion is the council will direct staff to conduct more in-depth surveys of both dentists and a larger sample of RDAFs to assess their opinions of adding the administration of local and nitrous to the RDAEF scope of practice. And to the board, the council will recommend that the board explore the possibility of eliminating the multiple layers of RDAEF certifications by incorporating all of them under one general RDAEF license. In other words, if this scope of practice were to go forward, it would be included in the RDAEF license.
Through the chair, if I may make a recommendation with respect to the motion, I think they are two wholly and completely separate issues. One is to direct staff to work with OPES to perform a function. But there was a recommendation earlier about the assemblance of a special counsel. And I think that if I'm hearing the council members' concerns, is that, as well as Ms. Fisher, conversations with respect to the future of the scope of practice for the EF would be something I would see would go through that special counsel. In addition to the request from the council members with regard to additional information about education and what that special counsel could do, particularly made up of who you've recommended, EFs, dentists, hygienists, and educators. Perhaps all of the work that you're requesting be either placed in the hands of staff or placed in the hands of the board needs to be placed in the hands of the council. And that way then the council has the opportunity to bring back to the DAC and the dental board recommendations with respect to everything from educational model to permit versus inclusion in program, as well as recommendations for blending or modifying the existing licensure status for EFs. I think an ad hoc council is the next best approach, made up of subject matter experts. And perhaps the council and the board would get the information that they are seeking through that special ad hoc committee.
With all due respect, I don't think we're quite there yet. I get where you want to go with this, and I think that's good, but I don't know that we have the information that we need. Now, this is just me, and if the other council members have comments on that, I'd like to hear from them.
Well, I think what's been discussed, though, is a focus group, so it doesn't have the formality of being a special counsel or even a task force. This would be a focus group of interested parties, essentially a work group coming together to talk about the issues.
Do I have to push a button on this, or? No, okay. Kristen Simpkins, I'm a doctor in Antioch. I've had an EF for about an EF2 for about 6 years. If you had surveyed me in 2012, I would have probably been one of those that didn't really see the need. So that's kind of why I'm here today, is to explain to you my personal perspective. as to why I feel that there is a need. I think it's easy to dismiss that when you haven't had an EF. You don't see how that functions in reality. In my experience, I used to have a 2-doctor practice. I was married. My husband left me about 1.5 years ago. So I went from a 2-doctor practice to a 1-doctor practice, and luckily with my EF2, I've been able to keep up the same amount of patient care at the same level of expertise and proficiency that I had before. And I do see that lack in the anesthesia protocol, though, because I do quadrant dentistry. I'm a member of the John Coyce Association. I've gone through all of those courses, Frank Spear, all of those courses. I do cosmetics. I do cases where patients are in chairs for a long span of time. And there are times when my EF2 is waiting 10, 15, even 20 minutes for me to come, from an exam or from whatever else I may be doing at that time to administer the additional anesthetic. We do a lot of CEREC, same-day restorations where, maybe I'll start a root canal, I'll prepare it. She has to come in and fill the canals and place the final crown, and my patient has worn through the anesthetic at that period of time. So that's mainly what I wanted to come here today, just to tell you that there is a need. Among the dentists, there's 700 and something EFs. So among those maybe 700 and something dentists who do have an EF, we do see that need. I see that need. So I just wanted to express that to you guys today.
Hello, Dr. Shannon Russell, Angels Camp, private practice, multi-specialty group practice, parallel a lot of the same items that were expressed with Dr. Simpkin. Is that correct? So just to keep it kind of efficient, in terms of my personal experience working with an EF and looking at now and forecasting into the future, I do see a huge benefit for myself personally within my practice, the quality of the care the patients can receive, the economics of the practice, especially with certain insurance reimbursements if you're wanting to help patients with insurance. Timing, timing in a busy group practice is really critical. And so in that regards, in looking at some of the problems that I've been hearing about practice mill, education, some of the multiple layers, it just seems to me that those are really easy solutions just to, whatever group needs to get together to just implement the same requirements that I had to be able to give anesthetic in my RDH. And I do agree that building, if that's the case when we want to eliminate layers, just defining the EF program to include that so that when an EF comes out, I expect them to be able to give anesthetic, just like I expect my RDH. And I also know that they have the level, I can be confident, because that's the same thing. I was even fearful of bringing an EF into my practice. Like, are they going to be able to deliver the quality of care that I'm expecting for my patients? Well, I'm fortunate I have an excellent EF, and just like there's excellent doctors and DDSs and excellent hygienists, we're always going to have the opposite end of the scale. So I think it's we can't allow that fear to prevent us from progressing to what our industry really needs here in California. Thank you.
Maureen Titus, CDHA. Since this is a very, very serious issue, it relates to public safety, patient safety, I would think that this body would want to have very scientific and very, very well conducted committee, not just an ad hoc committee, which is kind of a thrown together committee. It seems like some of the suggestions from OPEFs might be a great starting point, and I think that this is so important to the public that I do think we need to have good, factual, scientific basis on all of these decisions, not whether it's good for an individual practice or not, and whether the person is good or not. We need to have good science behind this, and that's my recommendation, suggestion, that we do follow those types of studies and have very scientific surveys done.
Hi, Susie Jordan, EF2, practicing since the first class. Unfortunately, my doctor could not come today, but he wanted me to say 3 words: standard of care. Right now, our patients are in pain. Even if we can just infiltrate, take them out of pain. Right now, they're not allowed to be out of pain. Could be one tooth, Some people get a numb quicker than others, so saying 1 tooth, that's a generalized statement. So quadrant dentistry, yes and no. Everyone is different. So between children, adults, matter of root canals, whatever it may be, yes, the doctor's being pulled in every which way, but those 3 words are not being met with the way it is right now, with EF2s working. I mean, I'm doing dentistry. I'm in there working on the teeth. I'm working, and we need to take care of our patients. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Denise Desert, and I have this whole page that I prepared to say, and I'm not going to probably say any of it because I think that you guys have heard a lot of it already. I'm an EF2 practicing, and I have an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree. I'm ACLS certified. I also have emergency response training, all of which is separate from my dental education. I've read the letters, and I've listened to the comments in opposition to this proposal. I'm disheartened by my fellow dental professionals that think I'm not capable of learning this. I do appreciate your comments regarding education and that it is possible for us, because I believe it is. I've been in the dental field for almost 20 years. And honestly, I've been offended by the comments that were made regarding my ability to critical think, or my ability to learn this skill and the background education that's needed for it. I don't want this handed to me. I want the education. I'd never dream of performing a skill that I didn't feel educated and qualified to perform. And I know that I'm not alone. Not every dental assistant or EF2 is on the job trained or has a lack of education. And so I just hope that you would keep that in mind. I'd like to enter my name as part of the focus group, and just say that I'm willing to take whatever prerequisites or coursework that is required to obtain this skill, because I really honestly see it as a benefit to my patients, to their safety, and to their comfort level. And I guess that's all. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Caitlin Ekus, and I'm an EF2 for the last 6 years, and I've been a RDA for about 11 years. On that, I work with Dr. Kristen Simpkins, and same thing, I had a whole thing that I was going to write out and say, but a lot has been said before you. But one thing that I want to make sure that you guys look into is the way that an RDA EF2 is utilized in a practice. When a doctor hires an EF2, it's not that they're sitting in their office just having them do all the fillings. A lot of the times we run our own column of work, and the doctor makes breaks in their schedule to come in and numb and do the procedure, and then we finish it and they come and check it. So it is hard. I know we talk about having the RDH come in and maybe numb when the doctor's busy, but they're running their own schedule as well, and they're very busy. So like we had said, even if we could pass just infiltration when a patient is even having a single tooth restoration done and they need to be numbed again, and we can get them out of pain. So I'm not waiting for our doctor to finish something, maybe a surgery, we place implants, and there's sometimes where she can't break immediately to come in and numb our patient. So we're having to wait 10 minutes or so for someone to come in and help get them out of pain. So we talk about patient care and things like that, and providing the proper comfort to them, and that's something that's important to us. We don't just want to add this to be like, oh yeah, we can numb, we're just like hygienists. That's not it at all. We went and got our EF2 knowing that anesthesia wasn't a part of that licensing, and now that I've been working for the last 6 years, I see how much of a need that is there for this, and that's why it's so important for us to try to be here. And it's hard. It's hard for dentists to make their way to this meeting when, we didn't find out till about maybe 2 weeks ago that it was going to be this Thursday at 9 a.m. So we're booked out months, and we had to reschedule patients to even be here, and we're only, an hour and a half away maybe. So I want you guys that are not doctors who have EF2s in your practice to make sure that you're taking into consideration that you're talking to those doctors as well, because every doctor I do talk to, and I know several who have EF2s in their practice, all want this. So thank you.
Claudia Pohl, CDAA. I would encourage the formation of the focus group. I think we would be in favor of that, and again, reiterating some of the previous comments about good, solid science and some of the information that would come back out of it.
Can't hear you.
Claudia Pohl, CDAA. We would encourage the formation of a focus group to further investigate this, and would also like to reiterate that we would like to see some good, solid information coming out of it so that we can make a good, informed decision about the need and all the things that go along with that.
Okay, any additional public comment?
I'm just getting ready to talk about nitrous, so I'm not making an additional comment.
I just wanted to comment to the two EFs that just spoke. I hope that I didn't contribute to making you feel like you were not educated enough, or that you wouldn't be able to do that, because I support, of course, the EF2 as a field greatly. And I think anyone who has the will, the want, the proper education, and the proper guidance and support can do anything. So please accept my apology if you felt that from myself or anybody else. It's just we need to go through the correct process to make sure this is the right choice for everybody.
I also concur with my colleague regarding the statements I've made. My concern is not for those that are trying to be educated and go forward in our line of work. It's people that aren't passing the RDAs, aren't passing the RDA EFs the first time. And as we've heard, now there's a proposal ahead of us that they want them to remain in school so they can get additional training. It's just for the public I'm aware and scared for, as far as I've seen a lot in the 35 years I've been working as an RDA. And that's kind of my foresight, was not to put you down or belittle you or any of that. I'm very sorry if it came across that way. I'm just concerned for the public safety.
I just wanted to add as well, because I forgot to add that in there. I fully, and I know that our other EF2s fully agree with you. We don't want something on our reputation. We want those other EF2s, and we want those education. We want them up to par as well. If there are other EF2s, there's not that many of us. So if we're looking for a job and you have EF2s out there who don't have the proper education or doing things that are outside of their scope of practice, that gives us just as a bad name as well. And we want the proper education, and I want the proper testing, and I want it to be at where it needs to be. And if that means that we go back to school just like the hygienists do and do all of those prereqs, of course I'm going to do that, because this is something I want. I think if it's those EF2s or EF1s, if that passes for them as well, if it's something that they feel that they can do, but they're not up to par, then they shouldn't be able to pass the testing for it. So if the education and the testing is there, this is something I want. If it's something that you're just going to say, hey, go ahead and take this couple weekend school to get your license in anesthesia, I do not support that. I don't want other EF2s.
I think we got
thank
the
you.
point.
I'm sorry.
You
get what I'm saying.
I'm
if
sorry,
you have new information.
I just wanted to say that neither of you offended me, and I was speaking to the letters that were written to you, and the statements that were said that I lacked critical thinking skills. That was offensive.
Joan, before you start, I would just like to point out that the motion is to direct staff to assess both nitrous oxide and local anesthesia being added to the scope. So I don't know that, do you have new information?
I just want to reiterate that, I've been bringing these two issues forward for at least 6 years, and that nitrous always gets shoved to the bottom of the pile and very little discussion has happened. And I just want to reiterate to you that people are already, either any of you use nitrous?
Yes.
Okay, would you come up here for a second? So your patient's under nitrous, the doctor's doing the prep, then the doctor goes away, and what do?
then I am basically monitoring my patient for the next hour and a half while my milled restoration is being prepared and baked.
And according to the regulations that currently exist for DAs, you can change the flow of gases if the doctor comes back in the room, standing there at chairside. So the doctor you would have to say, doctor, the person's, I need to adjust the flow of gases because there's too much nitrous, and the doctor would have to run back in there. So that, I think the important part is, one, there's no admonition against EF2s doing this, like there is a part of the Dental Practice Act 1750, I believe, that says that no one can give local anesthesia or general anesthesia other than the dentist. But, so that would have to be a statutory change. There is no admonition against nitrous oxide, which kind of makes it, in a way, a somewhat of a different issue. You can still look into it, do your research. But I just want to make it clear that all the EFs that work in offices that use nitrous are already having to become more than just monitoring it. They have a significant need to adjust the flow of those gases. And therefore, they should have the same training that ADA has developed for nitrous oxide. And that's the program that we're proposing. And I would hope that that could move along a little faster than, and I would hope that you don't have the same concerns. They're doing this already.
Let's
give them the education to do that.
I think we understand.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is the motion clear to everyone? Okay, do you want to go ahead and call the roll then?
Contreras?
Yes.
Contreras, yes. Davis, Washington?
Yes.
Davis, Washington, yes. Olagi?
Yes.
Olagi, yes. Ovard?
Yes.
Ovard, yes. Peacock?
Yes.
Peacock, yes. Rodriguez?
Yes.
Rodriguez, yes. Witcher?
Yes.
Witcher, yes. So the
Okay,
motion passes.
Thank you. That concludes that item. Number 10, is there any public comment on items not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none. Does anyone have any future agenda items?
Dr. Witcher, I just want to interject at this point. When this issue is discussed further, for the stakeholders and interested parties to be very careful of your testimony. I heard some things like standard of care. I have a patient waiting who may be in pain for a dentist to come by. That can't be happening, and you should not be testifying to that, to the DAC or to the board. So when you talk about the need for this, if you could talk in more of a general term and then have the people testifying come and explain why without saying, I leave my patients for an hour unattended with somebody who can't do anything about pain. That's something that then puts my ears up and said, okay, we need your name of your dentist and we need to go investigate whether the standard of care is being essentially complied with. So just be very cautious. I understand the passion that's going into this discussion, but also be cautious that you're giving your information to a regulatory board, and we just have to make sure that that everything is still being accomplished without this scope of practice in the standard of care is still being provided. Okay? All right.
Okay, seeing no requests for future agenda items, do council members have any comments on items not on the agenda?
Were we gonna maybe agendaize the pass-fail rate? Did we, at the very beginning, we talked about that?
We can do that. Now, I would have to remind you that that issue has been discussed at multiple past meetings.
Okay.
You know, if
But
we
a lot
make
of
a
us,
recommendation for it to
some of
go
us are
on the
new,
agenda,
so,
that will
yeah.
be taken into consideration, but you can make that request. And I heard others wanted that too, so that's fine. Okay, seeing no other council member comments? Okay, we're ready to adjourn. Okay, it's 11:30. I think President Stewart mentioned we were going to break for lunch. What's the will?
Dr. Stewart, would you like just to have everybody break for lunch now? Okay, and we'll be back at 1 o'clock.
Folks that are with us, and we have some very special guests with us today. So, Karen?
Thank you, Dr. Stewart. Assistant Executive Officer Sarah Wallace and I were having the discussion at noon about how we sort of glossed over recognizing our new legal counsel, who is our old and loved legal counsel. This is actually his first meeting back with us, and she said, well, we just kind of took off where we ended up. And she's absolutely right, but at this point, we want to welcome back our beloved Spencer Walker, who is our legal counsel for the new members who have not had an opportunity to know him. You will know him and meet him soon, and he has been with us many years. He was our legal counsel when I started, and I started 8 years ago. So welcome back, Spencer. We are so happy that you are with us on this journey. That being said, she's probably going to crawl under her chair at this point, but I want to recognize Spencer's supervisor, who is the Assistant Chief Counsel of DCA Legal, and that is Merlis Stockdale. She's attending the meeting today. People have heard a lot about how we do business, and I'm hoping that's in a good way. So thank you for coming, and if you have any questions about anything, please don't hesitate to ask. And then, of course, we can't stop the introductions here because two people who will be critical in our sunset review process that we'll be going into are Sarah Huckle, representing the Senate B&P Committee. She's in the audience today, as well as Robbie Sumner, who did attend our last meeting in Sacramento on the sunset review process. Thank you very much for coming. And again, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to call. That ends my introductions at this point. Oh, one more. I'll introduce Brianna Miller. Brianna Miller is new to the DCA exec office, and she filled a position that was formerly taken by Jonathan and Shelley. They had attended our meetings, and so she and Patrick Lay are going to be monitoring the meetings going forward, giving reports from the DCA executive office, and taking information back to the DCA exec. And so, welcome, everyone.
All right, thank you. I think we're ready to get back into business. So at this time, I'm going to ask all the Licensing Certification Permit Committee to remain on the dais, and the rest of us will retire to join the audience.
Good afternoon. My name is Ross Lai, Chairman of the Licensing, Certification, and Permitting Committee. It's been a long time since our last meeting, but there are a few things on the agenda that need attention. I'll try to make everything as brief as possible and bring us all up to speed. So I need someone, do I take my own roll?
I believe Jerry Westerfeld will call your roll.
Okay, great. Please call the roll.
Lai.
Here.
McKenzie. Absent. Medina.
Here.
Medina here. Morrow.
Here.
Morrow here. Olagi.
Here.
Olagi here. Witcher.
Here.
Witcher here. We have a quorum.
Thank you. So we want to first address the approval of the February 23rd, 2017 LCP. So as you can tell, it's quite a long time since the last one. So basically I've been chaired for the first and this meeting. So I'm kind of new at this too, so please.
I move approval of the minutes. I'll second that, Witcher.
Okay. Public comment? Okay, can you please call the roll?
Lai,
Yes?
Lai, yes. McKenzie, absent. Medina,
Abstain.
abstain. Morrow,
Yes. Yes.
Morrow, aye. Olagi,
Abstain.
Olagi, abstain. Witcher,
Aye.
Okay, item 3.
Good afternoon, Sarah Wallace, Assistant Executive Officer. We have included into the board meeting packets the summary of the dental licensure and permit statistics. These are all of the dental licenses and permits issued by the dental board. They're non-dental assisting related. On page 1, you'll see the total number of active, inactive, retired, disabled, and renewal in process licenses being issued and handled for the DDS unit. Page 2 gives a summary of the number of dental licenses that have been issued via each individual pathway, as well as the statistics for the number of permits that are currently active. We've also included a breakdown of the number of active licensed dentists within each county on pages 2 and 3. And pages 4 and 5 provide an update of where we are with our application processes, indicating the number of applications that have been received and processed during this year. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions? The question that always arises with relicensure that I'm seeing is that people, or dentists, think they've been placed on inactive when they don't submit the fees, and they think they go away, and then they go away, they move for 5 years, and they come back and says, "Oh, I thought I was inactive." I think there's a big confusion amongst dentists not knowing this. And so when they come back and recertify or try to reactivate their license or replace a new license, they're hit with a $3,000, $4,000 penalty. So I don't know if we can let people know that if they do leave the state, that they need to put themselves on inactive. And so we're seeing a lot of that. So I want to discuss how we can make it better for people that go away or they retire for a little bit. You know, how can we get that message to them? And so there isn't that.
We have seen, so what Dr. Lai is referencing is the canceled license status. If an applicant, or I'm sorry, a licensee renews in an inactive status, they are still required to renew biannually without having to complete the required continuing education credits. I think there is a misconception out there that if they renew into the inactive status, that that's just a permanent status and that they don't need to continue the every 2-year renewal. What happens is if a license is delinquent for 5 years, it falls into a canceled status, and the current statute requires that the applicant or the licensee, the past licensee, needs to apply for a new license to replace the canceled license. They have to pay back all their past due renewal fees and those delinquency fees, complete all of the CE requirements, and then it's brought before the board or the LCP committee, and then the board ratifies it at their meeting as to whether or not a license is issued. So this issue has come up several times. It's applicable across the board to all of our license categories. To alleviate some of the undue burden that this can potentially cause, that statute became in existence prior to the creation of the multiple pathways to licensure that we currently have. So as part of the sunset review process, we did include in our list of new issues
the potential to adjust or make amendments to that statutory provision to allow a past licensee to apply for a new license via one of the available pathways to licensure, or go through the pathway for a new license to replace a canceled license. So it's our hope that that should help alleviate that undue burden on the past renewal fees.
I'm also finding that in reviewing RDA, if they move or they raise children or they have issues paying their fees, and they also go inactive, and they're hit with that fine too. So that's something we have to address, because obviously, you know, they get in a hard way, they do some other job, and they think they're inactive, but they're not. And then this deters them from even kind of coming back if it's a $700-800 fee. So I think we need to work on that a little bit. So any other questions?
I just want to mention that I do agree with you in that stance. Is there something that could have maybe further discussion to try to look at what are some of the measures? I know you mentioned several that we're doing, but just to make sure that we're addressing that concern of some confusion that they're not fully aware of.
That would have to be a future agenda item?
That's what I meant.
Yes.
That's what I was mentioning to him, that we can have this agendized so that way we can have further discussion on this.
Okay, can we put that on the agenda for future discussion, please? Okay, thank you. Anything else? Any public comment? Yes?
LaDonna Joy Klein Foundation for Allied Dental Education. Question to staff, please, on page 7 of 9. Shows a remarkable number of division applications for the REB pathway. Given that we are looking at additional alternative pathways to licensure ourselves, can you give us some indication as to what is so deficient with those applications versus PGY1 or standard credentialing?
Sarah, can you answer that?
Sure, and Tina, jump in if you want to. But this is counting any deficiency that's marked in Breeze, and so it could be as small as we haven't received a fingerprint result, or we haven't received the proof of graduation yet from the dean of the dental school, but Tina can expand on that.
The only other additional thing I would just add is that that's our highest volume pathway for DDS applicants, and we have the ability to look up the results in house. So typically it is, like Sarah said, just a lot of different proof of graduation, photos, I mean, little things that could be holding up those applications.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further comment? Thanks, Sarah. Okay. Agenda 4 is one that's come up a few times, and I think Dr. Morrow wanted to put this on the agenda. So maybe you can give us a little background of the difference between a faculty teaching permit and a special permit. Oh, I mean, Melissa could do that, right? Can you do that for us?
Absolutely.
So I would like then for everybody to understand what's the difference between a faculty permit, a faculty teaching permit, and what we already have as we have a special permit for teaching.
So I'm going to go ahead and just cover the memo. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Melissa Brocken. I'm a staff services analyst in the licensing unit with the Dental Board of California, and I am going to be covering the LCP agenda item 4, which is the discussion and possible action regarding faculty licensure. So just as Dr. Morrow had stated previously, at a previous meeting we had discussed
that we wanted to discuss the faculty permit for dentists that are working as faculty but not currently possessing a California license or special permit. So under current law, dentists that are licensed in another state or country are exempt from California licensure while appearing and operating as clinicians or instructors in dental colleges approved by the board. The board currently does not have an application or registration process for faculty members that are working in California dental education programs and do not have a California license or special permit. And for us, that means that we don't have any knowledge of these individuals, the state or country by which they are licensed, their educational background, as well as whether they have to complete continuing educations for renewal of an out-of-state or out-of-country license. So to determine the number of faculty that do not possess a California dental license or a special permit, the board's executive officer composed a brief survey to be completed by all 6 dental schools. The dental schools were asked to provide information concerning the continuing education requirements for faculty members as well. So the survey that the executive officer sent out consisted of 7 questions. Questions 1 through 4 were designed to provide a breakdown of how many faculty members are licensed in California, in another state, or in another country. And the responses to these questions are provided in a table that is included in the memo. So examining the results of the survey, nearly 75% of faculty hold a dental license or permit in California. 5% of faculty are licensed in another state or country, meaning a total of 105 individuals are considered exempt from California licensure pursuant to Business and Professions Code Section 1626C. And I would like to highlight that these 105 individuals are the ones that would be impacted if we were to implement a faculty teaching permit. And then the remaining 20% of faculty members in the survey, which is a total of 405 individuals, are not licensed as dentists in any state or country. And the reason for this is because the dental school may employ faculty to teach non-dental courses to dental students, and in which case there wouldn't be a need for those individuals to have a license or permit with us. And then questions 5 through 7 from the survey were created to gather information on each dental school's requirements for faculty continuing education. California licensees and permit holders are required to complete CE as a condition of renewal, but the board does not mandate CE for faculty members that don't possess a license or a permit. However, the dental schools themselves may impose their own CE requirements for their faculty members. And so the remainder of the survey is tabled in the memo as well. And then I wanted to highlight that if the board is to implement a faculty teaching permit, completion of continuing education may be incorporated as a requirement for the renewal of that permit. Within the United States, there are many state dental boards that require some kind of a faculty teaching permit or limited license. So to get a better overview of that, we did do a review of the composite that's issued by the American Association of Dental Boards, the 2018 edition, for an overview of each state's requirements for the faculty permits or limited licenses. And then there are tables provided in the memo that showcase the statistics pertaining to common eligibility criteria, as well as the renewal schedule for faculty licenses. And then these statistics may assist the board with the implementation of the faculty permit and its related licenses. So getting to your main point, the board has received many inquiries concerning how a faculty teaching permit will differ from a special permit. So if implemented, the faculty teaching permit would require for dentists that are licensed in other states or countries to actually register with the board prior to working as dental clinicians or instructors in California dental education programs. As highlighted previously, under current law, these individuals are able to work as dental faculty without holding a California dental license or special permit. So what is the purpose of a special permit? Well, a special permit allows for a dentist that's licensed in another state or country to practice 1 day per week in the school's faculty practice, and that gives the dentist an opportunity to receive additional income. A special permit is issued after an applicant satisfies all of the requirements of one of the 2 application methods that are outlined in Business and Professions Code Sections 1640 through 1640.3. And the eligibility criteria for both methods is included in the memo. Of course, I'm not going to cover all of that, but I did want to highlight that for both methods, the applicant must have a pending contract with a California dental college to work as a full-time professor, an associate professor, or an assistant professor. And then another important thing to note about special permits, per dental school, special permits that are issued under Method 1 are limited to the number of permits that may be properly administered and supervised by the board. As you can see, that language is pretty vague, but currently we do have 24 individuals that fall into this category. And then per dental school, the special permits that are issued under Method 2 are limited to 5 permits for specialists and 5 permits for general dentists. And the table that is provided in the memo presents the statistics of special permit holders and the methods by which they were issued a permit. And as you can see, all of the dental schools are in compliance with the restrictions that we have set for the number of permits to be issued. And then approximately 62% of the permit holders qualified through Method 1 and the remaining 38% qualified through Method 2. So at this time, staff requests that the board determine whether to implement a faculty teaching permit. At minimum, the permit will allow for the board to monitor unlicensed dental faculty members that are practicing as clinicians or instructors in California dental schools. The board may also impose continuing education requirements for the renewal of the permit. And if implemented, the development of a faculty teaching permit will require for legislative and regulatory changes.
Thank you. Very concise. Would you like to add something to this?
Sure. Thank you.
I think this is...
Melissa, I want to thank you for your very excellent research and background material on this subject. I know we have communicated with each other a few times in the process, but thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
You know, my concern regarding this issue primarily stems out of my association in the academic community. The Dental Practice Act does allow for a licensed dentist in another state or another country to serve as a faculty member in a dental school in California. But also code states that a faculty member is practicing dentistry while they are performing their responsibilities as a professor, assistant, or associate professor. So that says that code is saying that if they have a license in another state or another country, they can hold a faculty appointment. But at the same time, it also says that that constitutes practicing dentistry. So another code says that unless you have a license, you can't practice dentistry in the state of California. So there's a little bit of a conflict there, and a number of other states, as the data that you have presented for us, of the 53 licensure jurisdictions in the United States, and I'm saying there's 53 because there's 50 states, there's Puerto Rico, there's the Virgin Islands, and there is one other one that's off of my tongue right now, but there are 53 licensing jurisdictions in the United States. And out of those, all but 13 require some type of a teaching permit or a special permit for non-state licensed dentists in the state where the dental school is housed. So California requires a special permit, which, as Melissa has explained, is for a full-time faculty, allows them to practice no more than 1 day a week and only in the school's faculty practice system. Where a major difference in that and this special and the faculty teaching permit is it is not limited to full-time, in other words, it could be part-time, and it does not allow for any private practice in the faculty system or outside in the community. So it is a teaching permit only and does not require full-time. So in other words, it could be a licensed dentist from another state or another country who has a part-time faculty appointment as a teacher. They are practicing dentistry as a faculty member in the school. I think that we, the board, has a responsibility to know who's practicing dentistry out here in the state in whatever form they are practicing it, whether it is in a private practice patient care system or if they are faculty members in a dental school. We have the responsibility to know who they are, what their background is, and that they maintain appropriate continuing education requirements for licensure renewal, the same as if they were California licensed. So we have a number of dentists who are teaching in dental schools that are not required to take a law and ethics continuing education course, unless their university requires it, are not required to take infection control courses unless their university requires it, which most of them do. But at the same time, I think we have a responsibility as a dental board to make sure that those individuals that are practicing dentistry in the state meet the state's requirements. And that's my reason for requesting that we look at and address an issue of a faculty teaching permit in addition to the special permit that we currently have. And there is a distinct difference between the purposes of those two permits, but the main purpose is that we know who they are, we know where they are, and that we know of the quality of the individual that they are. We have no criminal background checks on those. We assume that the university that has hired them has done a background check on them, and certainly that's a logical assumption. But to assume that somebody else is managing your risk is poor risk management on your part. So for us to assume that universities are doing what we would want to have done, it's kind of risky for us.
I just want to mention, thank you for that information, Dr. Morrow. So my question, there's 13 states, looking at a comparable state to our state, does the fees and everything else look similar to what they have, or how are we basing some of the, like for instance, the $1,000 application, special permit? Are we looking at a specific state or several states of what they're doing that we're trying to model after them, or are we just creating our own? I'm wondering how these two methods
I have
come
done
about.
some research on the wording of the codes, the regulations, and the codes for states that do have faculty teaching permits, and they vary. However, it's always related to the fact that the individual has a license, but not in the state in which, like not in Massachusetts or not in Washington or not in Oregon. But it also, the majority of them state that they are renewed on a biannual basis, just like the state license is, and that for renewal, they must document the continuing education required for that state's license renewal. So it basically mimics the state licensing requirement or relicensing requirement. Even though if they have a license in another state in the United States, they're going to have to do CE to keep that license up unless they have put it on an inactive basis. But I think it's important that the dentists that are practicing dentistry in California meet California's requirements for licensure.
Also, comparing to other states, we just got the ADIA composite information, which shows, of course, California has the most dental schools. We have 6 dental schools in California. I think the closest competitor to that is maybe 3.
No, 4 has New York. New York
4
has
dental
4.
schools.
So what would be the top 2 states that compare to ours, even though that we're one of the largest ones? Is it
Well,
New York?
I think just to bring the conversation back, we're comparing the other states at this point only in that they require faculty permits. The data that goes into that, with 6 dental schools with potentially that many more faculty teaching in our state, having to know what the requirements are in California, I think that's the basics that you need to be looking at. I think that when you determine what the fee would be, those things would be developed perhaps through a regulatory process, but I'm not sure that the fee would really, at this level of the discussion, the fee would be something necessarily to consider.
I just put the fee as an example, but I was just looking at the reason why is that why reinvent the wheel? So that means we're inventing our own wheel and creating our own methods, because I see 2 methods. Also, I just wanted to clarify that piece. It was just not necessarily just the fact of the fees. It was just looking at are we looking at other states of what they're doing? And if we are, then what areas are we pulling from them as an example? And then are we trying to create from our own research? You mentioned, Dr. Morrow, that we are using our own research to try to create this method.
Well, I think that if the committee, if this committee is in favor of pursuing with the full board the possibility of going in this direction, then I think it's a matter of making a recommendation, let's say, to the full board to move in the direction of seeking a teaching permit, a faculty teaching permit for non-California licensed dentists in dental schools in California. The wording of that, the exact wording of it, yeah, you can get models from other states, but you know, it's not that complicated a thing to happen.
Okay.
You know, it's just a matter of saying that it has to be done. Another thing that I want to point out, and maybe some of you are aware of this and some of you are not, of the data that we received from our inquiry, from our request survey, is that 26 faculty members are teaching in California dental schools that are licensed in another country. Not another state, but another country. My experience with faculty members, with dentists that are licensed in other countries, many of them receive a license upon graduation from school, and that license is forever and requires no continuing education or no renewal requirements. It is of a concern to me that we have individuals, potentially have individuals out there teaching our students and treating our patients in a way, because a faculty member in a dental school oftentimes sits down at the chair and does a procedure or part of a procedure to show the student how to do it. Now, that individual is definitely practicing dentistry. We don't know anything about them. We don't know what their continuing education has been. We don't know what their background is, and so forth. So those are my concerns that have led to my request to put this on the agenda for this committee, which then the committee needs to make a decision as to whether we pass it on to the board or whether not. I don't want to.
Ms. Medina, to follow up on your comment about two methods, are you talking about the two methods that are used for special permits?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I missed
Teaching permit?
No. So could you clarify your comment about two methods?
So I see there's a method one and a method two, unless I'm misunderstanding, and those are just some ideas, or is that?
No.
Okay.
So
that's method 2 of the special permits.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, method 1 is that it requires that the individual has completed an advanced education program that is approved by CODA or a discipline in dentistry, which is identified briefly as a specialized area of dentistry that has not been recognized by the American Dental Association as a specialty. And an example of that would be dental anesthesiology. Dental anesthesiology is not recognized as an ADA specialty, but the board recognizes it as a discipline. So it is considered as a specialty by the board. When the board talks about specialty, those disciplines that have been recognized are considered as specialties, but not. So method number 1 is that you have to have graduated from an advanced education program either approved by a CODA or a discipline that is approved by the board. Okay. Method 2 is that you have to contain expertise of a specialty nature could have been received in a foreign country. In other words, in a foreign country, you could have taken a program in periodontics. Okay? Now you've come to, and you have a license to practice in that country, and you've completed a periodontics program in that country. Now you come to the United States and you want a faculty appointment. You didn't complete a CODA-approved advanced education program, but you did complete an advanced education program. With the dean of the dental school's recommendation that this individual will provide a level of training and expertise to my curriculum and to my students. Upon request, the dean of the school will request a special permit for that individual. That's level 2,
Okay.
method 2. Also, method 2B is that it is a general dentist who has a license, but will also add to the dean's quality of education product. So that's the mode 2, is completed a CODA-approved specialty or discipline accepted by the board. And number 2 is has expertise in a specialty and or is a general dentist that the dean certifies will be of advantage to his or her educational program.
Okay, so, Bruce?
Okay, I have a few points I'd like to make. First of all, to say that the person is practicing dentistry and that we don't know anything about them kind of belies the fact that they are practicing within a special environment that is exempt, and everybody knows that it's exempt. They aren't practicing on the public. You can't, walk into somebody's office like a faculty practice and be treated there. You walk into the school, and my experience is dental school patients have a different set of expectations. They know they're going to be worked on by students, okay? And they go there because they're usually treated at a discount, and they know the care will be overseen. And so it may take longer, but it will cost less and potentially be higher quality, potentially. This has not been a problem in the past. This system has existed for many years. And although I don't necessarily disagree with the need for the permit, to say that these people are somehow not regulated, I think belies the fact that they go through a very detailed credentialing process to become a faculty member in a dental school. Dental schools, they're liable for what happens within their walls. They have to carry liability insurance. If there's a problem, they have to make good and be responsible for that complaint and that issue. And most have a process for addressing patient care issues within the school. Having gone through the application process to Pacific, where they don't have educational requirements required, I can tell you that it's just as rigorous as applying to be on a hospital, to have hospital privileges. They do your background check. I'm not sure I was fingerprinted, but everything else was done. I mean, it was one of the most thorough vettings that I've ever been through. And to think somebody could just slip through who maybe was not up to par, I don't think that would be in keeping with the mission of the school. So, I mean, granted, I guess the board would like to maybe have more assurance. I'm just saying this system has existed for a long time. I don't know why all of a sudden it's coming up now after so long. And it isn't like these people are just turned loose, with shaky credentials. They're looked at very carefully. The school is a special environment. For instance, students of dentistry, residents, students of dental hygiene are allowed to practice unlicensed in that environment as well. And so it's privileged territory. So, and then I notice also that most of the requirements are there for continuing education, infection control, CPR for most of the schools. I mean, I would think that maybe a word to University of the Pacific and Western that, why is there this inconsistency might prompt them to implement some of those requirements, and that might. And the only other thing I would say is we have a lot of regulatory and legislative proposals. Where does this fit in our priority? Is this a pressing issue that we need to do? I don't object to putting it on a list somewhere for a future item, but I would just question what the priority, what the need for it is at this time.
In response to that.
Before you go to that, Jerry, can you show the record that Meredith McKinsey joined our meeting and is part of our committee, please? 140. Thank you. Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay. In response to that, Bruce, part of my concern is the board, okay, and our responsibility. And maybe I'll sort of address this to Mr. Walker. In a dental school environment, non-licensed providers, in other words, dental students and dental hygiene students, are providing patient care that otherwise would require a license. So therefore, the license that is being utilized, that patient care is being done through the license of the faculty member, either the dentist or the dental hygienist. In our patient records, the student name shows as a provider, but the supervising faculty member shows as the attending faculty member, or the supervising license. It is that individual's license that the treatment is provided through. Now, in life there are unexpected outcomes, and those happen in dental schools as well as in private practicing offices. And at times, we have patients hire attorneys, and their attorney requests the records of the patient's care at the School of Dentistry. And when it shows that the dentist who supervised, the student is off the hook because the student is not liable. It is the supervising dentist that is responsible ultimately for the quality of care provided. If and when a set of records is requested and submitted to an attorney, and the attorney says, Dr. Smith, where is this dentist licensed? Cambodia. What's going on here? Do we even know that that dentist was here? Does the board even know that that dentist is here? Does this afford a level of protection for the board? Why were we not knowledgeable of the fact that that dentist who had a license in a foreign country was here in this country and actually practicing dentistry as a faculty member?
First of all, from a legal point of view, everything that you said is correct. However, from a consumer protection point of view, because the licensed dentist, who also is the faculty member, is ultimately responsible, the consumer is protected, from my point of view. However, I think the issue here is that the board should know who is performing any type of dentistry on a patient, even if unlicensed.
Well, I think the board knows that the students are providing care because there's an exemption in the code that says that students enrolled in dental schools in California are exempt from licensure.
I do understand that.
Right.
However, that does not mean that the student who is having dental work performed on them cannot file a complaint with the board, and quite possibly the records may not include the name of the person who was unlicensed, who actually performed those services.
Okay, so you're clear on that one. So pretty much we're protected. I put a lot of thought into this, and so maybe let me explain how I feel about it, and then we can have a more elaborate discussion. CODA, you pushed out CODA and say CODA approved school or license. So right now, as we see it, we have Desailly and Moldova are not CODA approved. So does that mean they can't teach in the future? Okay, I'll just put it out hypothetically. There are three things that bothered me about this proposal. And one was, do we need basically big government, is it the state saying you have to have it, or should it be put where the schools are responsible? I personally feel one way. I don't think we need to regulate a school based or a teacher based on that. I think it's the school's responsibility. Two, the teaching permit, are we off the, are we in the faculty clinic, or is it the wording, being that he sits down and checks, is that physically working on a patient? And how do we protect the public that way, okay? The third is, I'm concerned that there aren't going to be enough teachers out there that are willing to pay, get affiliated, get their fingers wet, and do a public service and help these kids, I call them kids, or dentists become good dentists. And 4, I think with diversity, you get a lot of different ideas from different countries. I've gone to lectures where the diversity and the way of doing something is actually sometimes more beneficial as a teaching method. So I'm concerned there aren't going to be enough teachers. I'm concerned that we are overstepping our authority. And who, you know, what are we protecting here? And that's what I feel is, do we really need it? Is it going to protect the public? We have something in place, the special permit. Do we need another layer of protection that we have to regulate? And I don't know. I'm part of the committee. I want you all to have an idea of how to make it better. Let's not make it worse. Let's not make it a big wheel. How can we make it where people are protected, students are protected, and all the entities that surround it to make it happen are on the same page? So, Bruce?
I guess I'd like to hear from staff, you know, how involved would this be? Would this be something we could relatively easily do, or is it going to be, you know, somewhat burdensome in light of all the other things we're trying to do? I mean, already as coming out of committees, we've had a number of statutory proposals, and we're going to have to make some hard choices as to what we can do and not do. I mean, I think it's an okay thing to do. I'm just questioning where it is in our list of priorities.
I think it'll be up to the board to determine where it falls within the list of priorities, and I'm not sure that you should necessarily not move this forward, because at this point you don't know what the full board would do as priority. Whether or not it's a big carry for staff, in my view, my staff will not like this comment. Doesn't matter. That if the board feels that this is providing public protection, that's why the board exists. And we can perhaps liken this to the discussions we've had about dental assistants. There are many dental assistants out there who we don't know anything about who are working in dental offices. You know, are we comfortable with not knowing who the faculty people are? I understand where Dr. Lai is coming from, and I suppose the board could also look into making the requirement on the school to verify certain things, or however that could work. So there are some options, but I think that it was brought before this committee today to start the conversation and see if there's anything there to continue the discussion.
So I think somebody wants to make a motion. Do we have public comment for it, or just? I would like.
Make the first.
Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
Go ahead, Steve.
Okay, I make the following motion, that the Licensure, Certification, and Permits Committee recommends that the board direct staff to seek legislative change and to Business and Professions Code, Division 2, Chapter 4, Article 2, to require that non-California licensed dentists holding faculty appointments in California dental schools be required to apply for and obtain from the board either a special permit or a faculty teaching permit.
So you want both, include specialty permit and teaching permit?
They would be separate from
It's
what I
either
heard.
or.
Either or, right?
Either or, right.
So specialty permits wouldn't change. It would be the addition of a faculty permit.
With the teaching permit not able to work in the clinic.
I'm sorry?
They would not be able to work in the clinic.
They would
The
not be
faculty
able-
clinic.
They would not be able to provide direct patient care on a fee-for-service basis. They would be restricted to their duties as an attending faculty supervising students, providing direct patient care in the clinics. Now, the special permit allows them to provide patient care on a fee-for-service basis limited to the faculty's practice and only 1 day a week, and requiring that they hold a full-time appointment.
Dr. Morrow, could you read the motion again slowly?
Sure, slowly. The Licensure, Certification, and Permits Committee recommends that the Board direct staff to seek legislative change to Business and Professions Code at Division 2, Chapter 4, Article 2, to require that non-California licensed dentists holding faculty appointments in California dental schools be required to apply for and obtain from the dental board either a special permit or a faculty teaching permit.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Now, this would only recommend that this committee essentially wants the boards to discuss it further as a full board. That's what the motion is. You're recommending that there may be merit to this discussion, and you want to go ahead and send it to the full board and see where they go. The full board may say yay, or the full board may say nay.
Right.
Is there a second on the motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Dr. Richard. Okay. Now public comment.
Public comment, please. No public comment? Free to vote, Jerry, please.
Dr. Lai?
No.
Dr. Lai, yes. McKenzie?
I said no. I said no.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right, no.
Okay. Lai, no. McKenzie?
Abstain.
Abstain. McKenzie, abstain. Medina?
No.
Medina, no. Morrow?
Yes.
Morrow, yes. Olagi?
Yes.
Olagi, yes. Witcher?
Yes.
Witcher, yes.
The motion passes.
Motion passes.
Okay, that's it, right? Okay, that concludes LCP.
I'm sorry. I think we have to take public comments for items not on the agenda.
Oh. Public comments for things not on the agenda. Future agenda items. Do we have? Okay. It's
And committee member comments.
members' comments not on the agenda. Seeing none. Thank you.
Okay, Substance Use Awareness Committee is next. If they'd come to the dais, please.